The girl tried to prove that she was a true saint. The guards held her, but she screamed that they were all deceived by a false saint who was posing as someone she was not. She simply could not believe that people actually believed the one who had deceived them. The lady begged in tears, while all the people rejoiced that she should be burned because the false saint must pay for her sins. The blonde was doomed by fear because vile voices continued to repeat about her execution, But people said that the real saint had manifested herself, according to rumors. She was so powerful that Saint Evelina, who came before her, could not even compare with her divine power. The priests insisted that there could not be another saint. Most likely, people dissatisfied with the current saint were simply spreading empty rumors. But still, they believed that this saint deserved such words. This lady, Iris, is believed to make demons flee with just a glance, and that's not all. She is also able to heal dozens of wounded at the same time, but they say that there can only be one saint in the world. If this is true, then it remains to understand which of them is the real Saint Evelina from the temple. The girl shouted that everyone was crazy, ordering this woman to be brought to her immediately, but they tried to convince her that these were just rumors that would soon pass. But the lady did not want to listen to anything, shouting that she immediately wanted to see her at home, to which the man said that they would send Rathbun, the captain of the Templars. The boy burst into the room, warning the saint that the Templars were approaching and she needed to escape. The fake saint is trying to kill Saint Iris, as the guy said, but she was busy treating the wounded. They did not have time to escape, and the man, a real warrior, arrived to them. The lady just looked at him and smiled faintly, in no hurry to run somewhere. She asked to wait a little because the saint had not finished her treatment yet. Iris treated the soldier with her hands, with real divine power. The boy, through his tears, tried to prove to the knight, because he himself saw everything, saw that Mrs. Iris is a real saint, because before their eyes she heals a person with her hands. She cured them all, from which the guy did not want to part with her, but she resolutely walked with the knights, saying that she was sure that they would see each other again. The fake saint looked at the redhead, ordering her to raise her head in front of her. When she knelt down and fulfilled the request of the proclaimed saint, she gave her a strong slap in the face. But the knight stood up for the girl, who had already been told that she had no right to pretend to be a saint and deceive the public. The woman screamed that the lady really thought that she would not know that this girl was practicing evil witchcraft. The blonde ordered the fake's head to be immediately cut off, but the knight asked the lady saint to have mercy, because he believed that it was better to study this issue first. But the lady did not understand what else she needed to say, because the impostor had been caught and nothing else was needed. But if this was evil witchcraft, then this means that most likely more people like her would appear. Therefore, he believed that for now, it's worth doing the research. He was right, but the lady said that for now it was worth throwing this impostor into prison. There, the girl was secured with chains on her hands and imprisoned behind bars. But some soldiers thought that this was not normal, because this woman was locked in a dungeon along with demons. Still, everyone understood that Lady Iris was definitely using divine power. However, no one in their days had ever seen Saint Evelina use her divine power. Everyone began to discuss this, when suddenly the main knight asked what was happening, asking him to stop talking nonsense. But this was, however, suspicious, because everyone definitely saw divine power. But the man said there was no point in talking about it. The blonde was completely sure that nothing would work out for her if she didn't get rid of the prisoner. She made her way into her dungeon, taking a dagger with her, attacked the woman chained to the wall, when suddenly the knight immediately pushed her away, asking what this saint was doing. But she screamed for the dark-haired man to leave her because this woman had stolen her divine power. The girl was completely convinced that if she did not end her life, she would lose her power. The man went into shock when the lady realized that she had just told him too much. He was very surprised that her divine power could actually disappear. Soon, all the priests and holy sisters learned that Saint Evelina's divine power had disappeared. From that moment on, the false saint realized that she needed to escape, and the priests tried to catch the impostor. Saint Evelina has already left the temple. From now on, the 49th Saint Evelina is no more. Mrs. Iris has become their saint, and there is no false saint. It is said that Templar Captain Rathbun protected Saint Iris, as expected of him. Moreover, Miss Iris is so benevolent that even the crown prince of the empire, Leon, and the leader king, who despises the Templars, find themselves on her side. Now that they finally caught the fake saint who was on the run, order reigned throughout the world, and people burned the impostor. The false saint who did evil came out of Roman with flames as a death sentence. The girl who read this novel really wanted to sleep, and she was the only one who could not rejoice at the happy ending, because she woke up in that very novel. She couldn't be happy because in 2 years everything would happen. Or rather, she will have to meet this in the future in Evelina's body. Before the heroine began to live like Evelina, the real her was completely different. The girl was in the hospital, corresponding with her mother, who said that she would not be able to visit her this week, and also asked her to listen to the doctor and follow the recommendations. The patient again thought that she was again a burden to her family. She had been in the hospital for a long time. They were probably just busy preparing to pay the hospital bills. The lady also wrote to her best friend, asking if he had a free day. But now it was exam season, so the guy refused her. But when he wrote all the exams, he should go see his best friend. He asked that the girl be sure to inform her when she will be discharged and also fight the disease in order to recover quickly. Actually, she got sick not because she wanted it, but because she was depressed, because she was sad and lonely, as if the whole world was gradually forgetting about her existence. The lady complained about this to the doctor because no one even came to visit her. The woman in turn suggested that the patient read books. The girl quickly became addicted to the novel that the doctor lent her. Even if she was in the hospital and there was no one next to her, in the novel magical stories were open to her. It seems that the patient of this hospital has fallen asleep again. She had not seen one book before, thinking that the doctor had brought it, but there was only the second volume, without the first. But there was no difference, so the girl decided to read. As the title Iris suggests, this is the story of a girl named Iris. The second volume begins with Iris learning about the power she possesses, about the divine. At the same time, Saint Evelina's divine power disappears from the great temple. With the disappearance of divine power, Evelina felt uneasy, and her evil deeds ceased. She attracted indecent men and expelled well-meaning priests. Meanwhile, Iris used her power to help people and became close to the 3 main characters. And so the second volume ended with the fake Saint Evelina being burned at the stake. Even without reading the third volume, it was clear that most likely it would be about Iris and the 3. Very tired from reading, the girl wanted to sleep and lay down. After which, she began to smell a strange smell, and a group of doctors gathered around her. Her consciousness became foggy. Opening her eyes, she saw a bunch of priests who called her Madame Saint Evelina. She finally woke up, which is why everyone began to thank the Lord for this. After all, a week later the saint finally woke up, so she tried to convey the news to other priests. But the heroine herself did not understand how this could happen. But if she concentrates, then Evelina's memories, or rather her body, do not come naturally. It was exactly the same girl that she had read about in the novel. Approaching the mirror, the blonde was touched by her beauty. She had slender arms and legs, bright eyes and lips, soft golden hair. There was not a single feature that did not evoke sympathy. A healthy and beautiful body that the heroine could only dream of. Having undressed in front of the mirror, the girl heard 2 clear memories when she saw the marks on her chest. Her breasts were indeed covered in redness, more like erotic hickeys. She recalled the men with whom the false saint had engaged in debauchery. She did not have a permanent partner. She did whatever she wanted with any man, no matter how many, in exchange for one night. Be it jewelry, gold coins, or her position, she gave them whatever she wanted. After the real Saint Iris finally appeared, there was not a single person who would remain on Evelina's side. But again, she had a rather violent temper, and in the end, the girl was burned at the stake. The lady had been ill for a long time, so she was helplessly alone from depression, but Evelina, on the contrary, was a healthy and beautiful saint. While the girl was taking a bath, she thought that being burned at the stake was not what she wanted. She could not just sit back and wait for such a terrible future. The characters who are most connected with the fate of Evelina are the real saint, Iris, captain of the Knights Templar Rathbun, and also the crown prince of the empire, Leon, and even Aslan, the king of magicians. The saint realized that if she changed her relationship with them, she would be able to correct Evelina's ending. The blonde began to think about how to make sure that Evelina's life did not end with burning at the stake. She thought that she could leave the temple and run far away before Iris appeared. However, since Evelina came to the temple very young, the world outside the temple, of which she has no memories, may be more dangerous. Moreover, if the only saint in the world suddenly disappeared right now, it would most likely cause chaos. Naturally, the Templars would be sent to search for her. There's nothing worse than running away and then being caught and dragged back. In any case, the only way to change the future is to be careful in your actions and improve your relationships with everyone, especially with the main character of the novel, but it was worth thinking about when exactly Iris would appear. As for the male characters who side with Iris, but it seems that her relationship with him has already been ruined, and a couple of days before moving into Evelina's body, he went into battle in the name of God. An incident that occurred during a large-scale expedition to pacify demons on the outskirts of the continent. For several months, the knights won victories, praising the name of their god throughout the continent. But then, the captain was informed that they had finally made it through their last battle without any problems, and all that remained was to return to the temple. Everyone is doing a great job, but we had to stay vigilant until the very end. But suddenly, a huge demon attacked the captain from behind. He wounded one of the soldiers, so the man ordered the priests to help. But the severity of the injuries was too high for their strength, so everyone thought that the saint would most likely help them. The captain asked the soldiers to hold out for a while, and he himself rushed to run. He ran with the wounded man to the palace, who was bleeding. There, he asked to call the saint as soon as possible. The wounded man was laid on a bed, and the captain, along with the priests, began to wait for the girl with divine power. The man quietly whispered that he could no longer hold on because he felt hellish pain. Rathbun just didn't understand why the blonde wouldn't come out. Suddenly, he was informed that before they left for the expedition, something might have happened between him and the saint. Then, the lady brazenly informed him that while the captain was away, other lower knights would have to serve her. The dark-haired one said that the purpose of this expedition was large demons, so he would not be there. The saint began to shout that this was insolence, because this man's duty was to serve the Holy Lady. Of course he must participate in the expedition, she said, when the priests entered the hall. He was very grateful, but the girl stopped showing whims. But she promised that one day she would make him regret it for the rest of his life. Suddenly, the captain understood everything. He realized that those words of the saint, because of what happened that day, could influence today's expedition. A saint is a person who has been given the ability to serve God and use it for the good of the world, but right now, she refuses to heal a dying knight who was attacked by a demon. And all this only because he refused her that day, although the girl did not even say what she wanted from the knight. The priests said the blonde sent word that Rathbun should kneel and crawl to her bed. Everyone was shocked, but the man only asked to open the doors. When this happened, the saint was sitting on her bed, surrounded by men, and the captain crawled towards her on his knees. She said that this was expected of a Templar captain, since he had stooped to such baseness for the sake of a simple subordinate. The man began to beg for the blonde to save the vice-captain, to which the lady said that she simply could not ignore his sincerity as he crawled towards her like a dog. After this, the vice-captain's life was saved. He could no longer hold the sword. In the end, he left the Templars and returned to his hometown. In the novel, Rathbun is a textbook example of a Templar who strives for nothing other than noble honor. But instantly, the saint was informed that the priest Carus was asking for an audience with her. Carus was the senior priest, and the lady remembered little about him. If she was going to live like Evelina, she couldn't keep avoiding him. Therefore, the girl seriously stated that he was allowed to enter. According to recollections, Evelina was not friendly towards Carus, and this meeting alone with him was exciting. If this were a real saint, it is unknown what she would have done. The man entered, knelt down, and presented his name before the saint. The lady looked at him as arrogantly as possible and asked what was the matter. She said she seemed to make it clear that she wanted to relax alone, speaking indifferently as if it was boring her. The priest knew that he was causing her inconvenience. Since she had been ill for a long time, however, he wanted to hear a definite answer from the lady saint in charge of the prayer meeting. This is the largest event of the Great Temple, which takes place only once a year. Only on this day will ordinary people be able to see the saint with their own eyes. However, in the novel, Evelina was not even present at this holiday, so she replied that, besides, she did not really remember what they asked her for then. But the man invited her to put him at the prayer meeting instead of the fallen high priest Dalen. The high priest does not get out of bed due to her advanced age. It seems that the high priests are now vying for her place, but she feels that this man should never be allowed to take her place. The girl said that she was not completely sure yet, so he could go. But suddenly, the man shouted what the saint had promised him, asking if she was doing this on purpose because she was not satisfied with the men he hired. After all, he selected the best men with the best faces and bodies and sent them to the mistress. He knew that she had enough fun with them. But if 2 were not enough for her, the priest could send as many as she wanted. At that moment, the heroine remembered that those men Evelina received through Carus. She could not believe that such a man was a priest, answering that she did not need any men, so there was no point in bringing them anymore. The lady decided to think about it later. First of all, the most urgent thing was the prayer meeting. Evelina refused to help prepare for the prayer meeting, so it's probably a complete mess right now, plus she was unconscious for a week. It was this prayer meeting that caused Evelina's reputation to fall to rock bottom, so from here on out the blonde will actively participate in preparations for the prayer meeting. So the lady will definitely act safely for herself, but she did not expect that there would be so many documents. Also, there were too many clothes to choose from. The maids understood that it was difficult for a girl to check everything thoroughly at one time, but over the course of time a lot of work had accumulated. She was also informed that if she was okay with the prayer meeting plan, they would like her to test it just once. They were shaking very much and were frightened by the conversation with the mistress, but the saint smiled and asked to be led to the right place. First of all, she will have to go to the central square. To more realistically realize her status as a saint, she should first go out onto the balcony. From there was an excellent view of the square where the territory was to be held. To think that this place would be filled with people who came only to see the saint. While looking at the landscape, the blonde suddenly caught sight of a man, wondering who he was. But suddenly, everyone began to make excuses, shouting that it was just a coincidence, and Captain Rathbun probably just didn't see her. So that person was Rathbun. He is completely different from what she saw in the memories and read in the novel. It must have been because the saint felt guilty towards him, but her heart was beating very strongly, most likely due to fear. The priests swore that it was impossible for the commander not to see the lady, and this was simple rudeness. But the lady didn't understand that if he really grabbed the knife and jumped here, she wouldn't tell him anything, because she herself didn't know why the hell Evelina did that. This was felt even more strongly when you personally faced his angry gaze. If everything went like this, she would definitely be burned at the stake. First, the blonde must successfully hold a prayer meeting if she does not want to die. The saint flopped down on the bed and shouted that it was all too hard. She has done a lot, because how long has it been since she could walk so freely on her feet? With her original body, there would be no way for the girl to feel so tired. Although she was tired, she was grateful for it. The lady did not want to return to her original body again. She wanted to move a little more, walk around a little more and be useful. The priests were waiting for the saint outside the door, although she just wanted to take a walk alone and did not want everyone to follow her around every day. But suddenly, she remembered about the secret passage. Behind the painting is the central square, and behind the mirror is the garden behind the house. The passage behind the bookcase leads to the great temple, but the blonde wanted to go to the garden because no one should be there now. The door had no handle. It opened with the help of divine power. Probably, if the mistress touched her with the doors, the divine power, as it turned out, penetrated outside, opening the magic door. She used the force, but she had no idea how she did it. Opening it slightly, the blonde tried to slowly enter so as to be as quiet as a mouse, and no one would notice her. Thanks to divine power, this passage was quite light. Come to think of it, Evelina did not have divine power, and because of this, she was accused of being a false saint and brutally killed. It was written in the book that divine power gradually disappeared after Iris appeared. But the reasons for this phenomenon have not been identified. Then the reason for the disappearance of divine power, according to the heroine, was Iris herself, who could have something to do with this. Finally, the girl saw the same door that was in front of the entrance, and going inside, she saw a wonderful garden. A light breeze and the refreshing smell of trees hit the young lady's nose, and 2 shining moons and unusual fruits and flowers delighted the eye with their excessive beauty. The unfamiliar and beautiful world seemed like a fairy tale to the blonde, which she wanted to read and explore all the secrets of this place. It was already time to return, but the lady decided to sit down on the bench, even though she had a lot to do again tomorrow. But suddenly, looking at her thighs, the saint saw some strange marks. They looked like specially made marks. What was strange was that the girl didn't remember anything about it at all, which frightened her very much. There were too many lost memories. There was something wrong here, something that she didn't know, and that wasn't written in the novel. Suddenly, her gaze became clear, and a man had already gotten down on one knee, saying that he had come to serve his mistress on the orders of the priest Karis. He had not been told this in advance, but he had heard from his predecessor that the blonde liked to spend time in the garden often. In case he suddenly met her, the guy sneaked into the gardens, but then the lady herself appeared, which was God's will. The lady suddenly asked to leave and tell Karis to stop with this selection of men. But the man did not leave, taking the saint by the hand and shouting that he had put so much effort into coming here. Suddenly, the stranger said that he had already heard stories about how the lady often changes her mind, but asked to give at least a chance. He said that he would definitely be able to satisfy the mistress, so he could be entrusted with a gift from the saint. The blonde screamed at him to leave, but the man looked at her, announcing that he would do something that she would clearly like. The pervert asked to resist more, but he would never stop. He was too strong for the saint to push him away, and she could only shout that she really didn't want any of this. Instantly, the girl was dropped somewhere between the flowers, and the man himself flew off somewhere, thanks to someone's strength. In front of the lady stood Rathbun, who did everything to protect the lady. This feeling of fear could not be compared with what the blonde felt when they locked eyes with him back then. Strong shoulders, hard muscles, large forearms, and huge hands, the captain had it all. The lady thought that he could take her head off with one hand, when she suddenly realized that she was dressed too openly and he could see the wrong person. But he suddenly said that it would be better if the lady did not show. The man told her not to appear like that in front of other people, or he told her not to appear in front of him. But did it matter? Because he already despised the lady. What the lady is sure of is that Rathbun will never forgive Evelina. However, the blonde still bowed and thanked him for his help. But he only said that he was glad that the girl did not say that he had interfered with them. But the blonde thought that everything would be much simpler if she punished him with her divine power, for which Rathbun asked for forgiveness. The man took the rapist in his arms and hurried to carry him somewhere, and the lady could only follow him with her gaze. She thought that in the future, this savior would kill her with the same hands with which he saved her now. When the captain returned, everyone was surprised that he brought a stranger who somehow ended up in the temple. But everything was already clear. Because of his pretty face, it was clear that this man was coming to the saint, to which Ratban asked to tie him up, and in the morning, when he came to his senses, to drive him out of the temple. One of the priests was surprised by this order, asking why they would not question him. But when he said that if they draw up a protocol, they will be able to publicly announce it, because all people should know the truth about the atrocities of that woman, the guy was immediately captured. The captain ordered Sidel to watch his words, because when he joined the detachment of the Temple Knights, he swore an oath of allegiance. Whispering that he understood everything, the knight left the room. But to this, the man only ordered to take care of him. In his office, Rathbun clutched his head, wondering what it was. A man with such an expression thanked him for his help. And the person who said these words is not exactly Saint Evelina, whom the captain knew. Sighing heavily, the brown-haired man tried to push away these thoughts by closing his eyes. He noticed that it looked like new documents had arrived for approval, namely, a decree on security at a prayer meeting, and it was necessary to choose someone responsible for the safety of the saint. In her office, the girl was shocked that she needed to learn so many prayers. She learned the words that God looks at the world from heaven. Soon all people will be filled with suffering, when she realized that everything had already been learned by the one who was in this body before her. Apparently, Evelina was not so lazy. She remembered everything he taught today. In childhood, she was told that God would be happy about this. At that time, she was very diligent. The girl said that the priest Karis committed outrages. He certainly wants to meet with her. The blonde looked away and then asked to let him in, and for everyone else to leave, because she couldn't constantly avoid him, and it was time to finally end things with him. But he shouted that the saint could not do this to him, because she appointed another person, and not him, to be responsible for the prayer meeting, which was true. She chose a suitable person, another priest, whom everyone hated because he constantly gave advice to Evelina. But Karis said that all this time he was devoted only to her. The blonde knew very well that he was still making a lot of efforts for her sake. But she asked to take any prayer from this table and read the first line. The priest took it, and it was written there that God looks at this world from heaven, and soon all people will be filled with suffering. Afterwards, she took the piece of paper, ordering him to say what happened next, which is why the man got nervous, because he couldn't say what was written there due to the fact that the saint had just taken the paper. To this, the girl said that all these prayers were intended for use in a prayer meeting, and she could not appoint a priest who did not know the prayers to lead a prayer meeting. And she can't pretend that she doesn't see this young man's efforts, so he won't be put aside for the meeting, but instead, she will give him a reward that won't upset him. He suddenly declared that he did not need this award, and then threw all the papers on the floor. The priest swore that the saint would greatly regret what she had done today, but she only lowered herself to collect prayers from the floor. She thought that if she said so, he would retreat, but this would not happen. Everything got mixed up when suddenly the lady saw the security plan for the prayer meeting. This was the annual personal protection of the saint, and all day long he would be by her side. The commander of the knightly order, Rathbun, was excluded from the guard at the prayer meeting. The deputy commander is responsible for the personal safety of the saint. because it is quite natural why he does not want to be near Evelina. In the novel, while Evelina was a saint, Rathbun fulfilled his duty to the very end. But now the commander hates Evelina to such an extent that no matter how hard she tries, it is impossible to change the outcome. The priest met the saint, informing her that a 2-day prayer meeting was finally starting today, asking if the girl had slept well. She replied that everything was fine, but in fact, the lady did not sleep at all. The man understood that the girl was very nervous. Until now she had coped with everything for many years, and this year he is sure that she will also succeed. Plus, compared to her past years, the blonde did a lot more preparation, and to be honest, this is a first for her. If initially Evelina had to gather all the people she met in the years before her death, then there would be no more than 10 people. But now she suddenly finds herself in front of thousands, tens of thousands of people. At an event that everyone wants to attend at least once in their life, it is said that for the poor people from the outskirts, it takes several weeks to get here on foot. And when the last word of blessing is uttered by the saint, a fierce battle begins for a place next to the saint. This is a world in which God actually exists, and when demons appear, divine power destroys them, and therefore people believe in the power of God and rely completely on it. So with this faith, people travel such a long distance just to get a closer look at the saint herself. Therefore, the lady would like to console them at least a little. The girl decided that she would definitely cope completely for the sake of these people. She rehearsed everything dozens of times and is no longer a stranger in this world. There was no need to be nervous about it anymore. The blonde finally got ready and even picked out a good outfit. The priest declared that she was perfect. It was worth hurrying because the prayer meeting would begin soon, but one of the priests had something to say. The senior priest worriedly asked what had happened. The saint immediately realized that the news was connected with her. Therefore, so that the guy would not worry about telling the news, she said that everything was in order and he could talk in front of her. The fact was that false rumors were spreading among people that the saint spent every night with different men. They say that the girl wastes her fortune and neglects her prayers and her duties. Thus one incurs the wrath of God. The blonde was shocked by such news because this cannot be. Such things could not just come out to people. Everyone began to deny it, but the lady said that everything said was true. To which her servants declared that they would cancel the last program of the prayer meeting. The saint fell in horror because this was the most important moment, the saint's blessing. Everyone was looking forward to this, and the blonde couldn't believe that she had betrayed everyone. But since rumors spread very quickly, someone may appear among the crowd who wants to personally harm the lady. Plus this year Captain Rathbun won't be with her. She tried to do everything right. She really put in a lot of effort, but in the end most likely she would not be able to avoid the predetermined ending. Because of this, all the priests bowed down and asked the saint for forgiveness. But despite this, the girl stated that all programs would be carried out according to their plan. Whatever the outcome, it's too important. Even if it's just her futile attempts to do something, she will do what needs to be done. Leaving the room, the blonde saw the commanders of the temple knights on the threshold. He bowed before her and said that he would accompany the saint. But suddenly, she remembered that Rathbun was originally the kind of person who did everything possible to fulfill his duties. And no matter how much he hates the saint, now he will protect her. His hand was very large and warm compared to the girl's hand. In this case, the blonde asked to take care of her. They held hands and stepped forward as a sign that the event would take place. At this event, the nun blew into a special trumpet, calling all the priests. After this beautiful sound, everyone realized that the saint was going out into the world with her escort. Everyone sang that God's gaze had reached this land, and they, together with the people, were receiving this wonderful grace and great love. It was here that her place was, the place of the saint. Looking around, the lady noticed how many people had come to receive her blessing. The hopes and love of all these people, how could all this be an empty phrase for Evelina? No matter how hard it was for her, she never showed it. As if she were an adult, kind, she had to be quiet and always try not to contradict the expectations of others. However, Evelina considered all this unworthy of her attention. The girl could not understand how this could happen because all these people were ready to love her so much. The lady worried in vain. Everyone joyfully greeted the saint. The priest said that the last part of the program was coming soon and the blonde needed to go to the stairs. Her guard took the girl's hand. Everything was fine, even if he constantly held her. It seems that because today may be dangerous, he is indeed a man who performs his duty flawlessly. The lady was told that she didn't have to bless everyone. She could just walk past them as she did last year. But she refused when suddenly she saw a woman who asked the saint to bless her child because it took her 2 months to arrive in this place. There were so many people with serious illnesses. Divine power can heal wounds and poisoning, but diseases given by nature cannot be cured. These people must not know this and came here for comfort, and she too wanted to hear at least one kind word. The man tried to persuade the lady not to go to a crowd of people because it could be dangerous, but she stubbornly wanted to bless her grandfather. In this case, the blonde asked Captain Rathbun to bring the man, but the same grandfather shouted that the holy dirty prostitute. The man held this old man with his hand, trying to lead him to the girl. But he stated that he knew how the saint tumbled with men in the temple every night. But suddenly, in order to protect the girl, Rathbun takes her under his wing, ordering her to capture that scoundrel. Everyone began to discuss these rumors that many men received gifts from the saint. The atmosphere instantly changed, and even those who doubted were now convinced of it. They shouted at her that she wouldn't be able to hide behind the temple knights for long, but she thought that everything was going well, but in the end it all failed, just like in the novel. Whatever the lady does, everything still goes according to the plot of the novel. In this case, the girl had nothing left to do. The blonde approached that grandfather, asking if he still wanted to receive a blessing from her. She decided that she would do as she wanted, to which grandfather hid his hood, and it turned out that he was rotting from the inside. Even in the most difficult moments, and even in the happiest moments, God will always be by his side, receiving her blessing. It is at every moment whenever he wishes. The saint prayed to God to give strength to this elderly man, but he just smiled and thanked the girl, and she was surprised at his voice. As it turned out, judging by the voice, this is not an old man at all. The man kissed her hand, saying that he would look forward to the day when they would see each other again. The knight said that the saint suddenly began to work hard, and they were sure that she was faking it, given her usual behavior. Soon these dirty rumors will spread throughout the continent, but in the history of the Great Temple there has never been such a shame, because the saint is openly called a girl of easy virtue. The lady was sitting in the garden and listening to all the nonsense that the men were talking about, when suddenly the conversation turned to the priest of the ceremony, Commander Rathbun. But suddenly they left, deciding to go prepare for tomorrow's prayer meeting, and the saint curled up into a ball, starting to cry quietly. She thought that she just went out to get some fresh air, but rumors bother her even at home. The blonde lay down on the bench, saying that this cannot be explained, because Evelina cannot be a prostitute if it was she and not the men who paid for the night with a man in money and jewelry. She simply did not understand what she should do now, because today she was really scared, and did not expect this from Rathbun. The commander told her that everyone who created chaos at the meeting, and they caught them and locked them in dungeons. The blonde took a mug of tea and thanked him, taking the position of the victim. Suddenly, Rathbun knelt down and declared that he could not fulfill his duty and was ready to take responsibility because the saint was poured mud right before his eyes, to which the blue-eyed woman replied that it was her mistake, that she asked the man for an unnecessary request. But he did not let up, whispering that no matter what the reason, it was he who was responsible for the fact that the mistress was harmed. The man directly stated that this was his responsibility. To this the girl did not know what to say, but the answer was determined and the lady must say what he wants to hear. The blonde exclaimed that she understood the knight, and to begin with, he would carry out his duty without any changes until the end of tomorrow's prayer meeting. Rathbun shouted that by not punishing him, the saint was condoning this. The girl ordered to leave, explaining that this was an order. Blue Eyes could not sleep for a long time, thinking that the man really demanded punishment because he was a straightforward person. Also, she was worried about the question of who the man was and for what purpose he disguised himself. He said that they would see each other again, but outsiders could not freely see the saint, and this was very suspicious, but the lady did not feel threatened by him. The lady woke up and shouted that she had to go back to her room. Having woken up completely, she realized that she was already in her room. But she remembered exactly that she had fallen asleep in the garden when she suddenly realized that she had already overslept. But the girl could take part in today's ceremony after lunch, and the priest was glad that the lady looked rested today. Indeed, the blonde was feeling well, but she still asked if they had brought her into the room in their arms. Suddenly, the man was horrified when he realized that the lady could be leaving the room. No one knew that she was leaving. Most likely, she returned through a secret passage. The priest asked if the girl would like to check the offering first before the ceremony. Immediately after the ceremony, she would have an audience with representatives of each country. Divine power is the power to fight monsters. The closer the country is to the Great Temple, the safer it is from monsters, and the temple sends high priests to the most distant countries to protect people. Therefore, in every country there is a tradition of sending offerings of thanks to the Great Temple during the celebration of the prayer meeting. She just needed to check the offerings and later express her gratitude in return. When the blonde came out, she saw two types of offerings that each country sends. The first is grain products, wine, fruits, healing herbs, and other necessities for the people gathered at the prayer meeting. And second, it is dedicated only to the saint, or rather, it is a different type of jewelry. She knew that modest gifts are given to express gratitude, but this does not look like a modest gift. The blonde understood that all this was not for the sake of faith, but simply for the sake of the saint. The lady became very angry, shouting who was this fool to send so much garbage as an offering, shouting that she needed jewelry. These were the memories the saint had. They tried to explain to her that there was no point in swearing because Laris was a poor country, and a lot of time and effort was spent to create such a tapestry. The blonde loved to mock the believers so much that she took a torch and burned the gift they brought her. She said it didn't matter to her. Evelina ordered never to send anyone to that country again, for which the budding saint was ashamed. She held her head in shame. Suddenly, she was given a precious stone, the offering of which was sent by Laris. It all looked incredibly expensive. But the girl recalled that she had said that this was a very poor country and realized that they had sent it with a request for help. The blonde ordered this offering to be returned. But the priest suddenly declared that it was dangerous to leave Laris this time, but the saint said that she understood everything and asked to send knights from the temple to them. She also suggested increasing the number of knights sent, because last year it must have been difficult for them. Tears appeared in the man's eyes. He bowed and thanked the lady. The lady did not quite understand where so many offerings were sent from, as she was told it was all sent by the Aphelios Empire. The second main male character in the novel is from this country. The Aphelios Empire is a country whose power has grown rapidly. After the emperor ascended the throne several decades, it conquered many countries in the war and has now taken control of the entire territory around the Great Temple. Due to religious beliefs, they cannot touch the temple, and therefore consider it an eyesore. Together with the elderly current emperor, the empire is actually led by Crown Prince Leon. He is the second male hero of this novel. The influence of the Great Temple had to pass into their hands as his father taught him. At the moment, the Empire and the Great Temple are in a confrontational position, and in the original story, Evelina was furious that the Empire sent huge amounts of offerings to the people, but did not send anything to her. But for some reason the course of history changed a lot, and they still sent gifts to the lady. The Empire sent not just jewelry, but also sculptures, paintings, and objects for ceremonies, everything that the temple needed. The blonde said that she herself would be able to see all the offerings. She was completely confused, thinking that she might have missed something in the novel. There was also the question of why Evelina only asked for jewelry. The saint was not at all interested in such things. She must have simply given it away as payment for spending the night with the men. It seems that the girl deliberately did everything to be hated. Be that as it may, now the blonde will do everything in her power, send everything back from the offerings and check the official letters. There were a lot of them, and the letters themselves looked luxurious. Among them was a strange letter, on the outside of which there was nothing indicated. It said that since the deal was concluded, someone would soon come for a visit. This was suspicious, and the lady did not understand whether it was really sent by the saint, because this is a very strange manner of speech, and it is unknown who the sender is. Taking the piece of paper in her hand, the girl felt severe pain. She bit her finger, and suddenly her table with papers began to burn with fire. This letter immediately disappeared, as if the devil himself had taken it. There wasn't even a trace left of the fire, and the blonde at first thought it was her imagination. But looking at her finger, the saint realized that everything was real, because she had a cut, and in that case, it was magic. Unlike divine power, magic in this world is rejected. This magic is so strong that it can tempt anyone, but it is this power that is the source of monsters. But who could use such dark power to send a letter to the Great Temple? Most likely it was the Wizard King from the northern part of the continent, the third main male character, Aslan. This was strange because in the original story, Aslan only began to act after he met Iris. Suddenly, while the lady was thinking that something had gone against the plot, the saint was called out again. The priest asked if there were any problems with the offerings. The lady asked if the ceremony was going well, to which she was told that everything was going according to plan, so in half an hour she could already go out in public. Rathbun appeared in the room, and the saint noticed that he had changed his cloak. The girl suddenly thought that it was because of her attack that the man ruined his attire. She tried to apologize because she didn't think that his plans would become unusable. But the dark-haired one said that he didn't even notice, which made the blonde become even more worried. However, the saint announced that he could be calm because today there would be no blessings, so no one would throw eggs. In this case, the priest said that while the lady was waiting, he would bring her tea. When the cup of drink was brought, the girl said that this tea was delicious because she drinks it all the time. But in fact, it did not have any special taste, so Evelina was confused and did not even know what to say. The servant smiled as she thought the saint liked this tea since she chose it herself. Suddenly, the girl was told that it was time to get out, but she suddenly began to lose consciousness. A day ago, the commander stood on the balcony and thought that he did not know how to feel about his mistress. When he thought about the vice-captain's job, he couldn't forgive it, but as the commander of the knights, Rathbun has no choice but to do his duty. He could not understand from what moment everything went wrong, before the captain was injured, or when he was humiliated for no particular reason. The man could not remember exactly at what moment this happened. Come to think of it, when they were still kids, they definitely got along well. Walking and thinking about everything, the brown-haired man didn't even notice how he reached the garden. Looking at the plants among them, Rathbun noticed a sleeping girl, apparently sleeping herself. The man was shocked by what the saint was doing in the garden. Even though she was not allowed to go out, he concluded that it was unlikely that she had contacted someone outside. This was not his duty as a knight, so it was time for him to return. However, he heard the saint's voice. Thinking that she had woken up and approaching her, he noticed that the lady took his cloak and snuggled up like a kitten. Someone's voices began to be heard from behind the forest, and Rathbun realized that the saint would have problems. If they bump into someone while in this position, there will be consequences. The brown-haired man began to try to wake up the lady because someone was already walking in their direction. Article 1, Paragraph 3 of the Rules of the Knightly Order of the Temple. It was impossible to touch the body of the saint without her permission. But taking her in his arms, he decided to take her to a safe place. The knights decided to sit on the bench, so it was necessary to escape as quickly as possible. It really was a beautiful night, as people said. News of the secret passage is passed down from generation to generation, only to the captains of the knights and the saint. However, the saint thinks that only she knows about this passage. The captain should only use it if it is a true emergency. Unlike a saint, a man has very little divine power, so he should not use it thoughtlessly. Rathbun's conscience gnawed at him for secretly sneaking into the saint's room. The man went inside, putting the girl in her bed. But he grabbed his head in time, asking himself what he was doing, because all his actions were contrary to the regulations. He broke a lot of rules and didn't understand what he was thinking at that moment. Having decided that he needed to return quickly, Rathbun left the girl's room. His cloak was all wrinkled and he needed to change quickly. But the lady suddenly announced that the man had changed his cloak for some reason. He asked simply not to pay attention to it, because he would no longer succumb to the influence of the saint. When the blonde lost consciousness, she saw her arms, emaciated to the bone. These were not Evelina's hands, these were a real heroine. She didn't understand how it happened, when suddenly she saw the real Evelina in front of her. The girl asked what this mentally ill girl was doing. The girl began to make excuses, saying that she was very sorry. The blonde just laughed as the depressed woman tried to explain that she did not intentionally inhabit someone else's body. Taking this brown-haired woman by the chin, the saint said that it was she who brought her into this world. The heroine was very surprised that it was the character from the book who decided to give her his body. She threw the girl on the floor, saying that she deliberately chose the most stupid one, and the lady would still decide to joke about the saint, although she herself lives such an insignificant life. The girl shouted that she had worked very hard, but precisely because for some reason she is doing this useless work, the blonde told the lady to live carefree, adding more fun to her life. This was incredible nonsense because the saint told her to lead a dissolute lifestyle. The girl suddenly started asking why Evelina was doing this. Was it really on purpose? She didn't understand why the blonde needed everyone to hate her, to which she answered that it didn't matter whether she liked something or not, but this body was holy, and no one would dare stand in her way. The blue-eyed girl said that the saint is an untouchable creature. The Korean woman shouted that this is not so, even if this girl is a saint. No, Evelina does not yet know the end of this story, the tragic end in which her place will be taken away and she will be burned at the stake. The lady decided that she would not deliberately aggravate the situation, so she said that they were throwing mud at her, despite the fact that she was a saint. She only remembered with disgust that it was at a damn prayer meeting. But suddenly, she grabbed the girl's shoulders and asked why she let Rathbun go so easily, because she should have cut off his head because he could not protect the saint. The patient asked why Evelina hates this man so much and what he did wrong, to which she announced that he really didn't do anything, that's the problem. The lady threw her aside, saying that he was not to blame for anything, and she made a big mistake, because it was better for her to find another soul instead of the heroine. A free soul true to its desires and whims. She is definitely determined. The body that the girl received for no reason, she can suddenly lose at any moment. It seems that this is how it will all end. The blonde suggested that the lady must like this body, or she didn't want to die so much, so the saint could give it to her again, but in return there was one condition. The girl was ready for anything if it was not murder, because it is still impossible to do in this body. A saint cannot kill people. Be it another person or yourself, there is no way she can do it on her own. Besides, it was not fun at all, and since it happened like this, the lady should do something funny. To begin with, it was worth spending the night with a man, and the deadline for this task was 1 week. The blonde began to laugh, saying that if she didn't meet the deadline, she would immediately throw her out. Evelina asked to remember that she monitors the outside world. Waking up in her bed, the saint screamed that she needed to return somewhere. Everyone was glad that the saint had come to her senses, but she still had to remain calm. She barely came to her senses after 3 days, and she should have been more careful, to which Evelina was shocked, because there were only 4 days left. The girl heard Evelina's voice, and it turned out that the time she was unconscious is also counted when the blonde ate in bed. Again, after a long time, she felt like a patient. She never wanted to return to that terrible time. The life that the saint had enjoyed so much in the last few weeks, she was free to walk with her feet wherever she wanted, and was grateful for the wonderful feeling of tiredness after a day of work. And now Evelina could lose all this. The blonde didn't want to lose this for anything, but she toyed with the idea of having to spend the night with a man. She didn't even understand how she could do it, but Rathbun was nearby and didn't let her think. He said that they still could not determine why the saint lost consciousness, so he apologized. The man doubted the tea the girl drank, but as a result of the investigation it was confirmed that there was no poison in it. However, in the course of the investigation, they received additional investigations. They found out that the commotion at the prayer meeting was caused by the priest Karras. The girl asked how the prayer meeting happened, to which she was told that everything ended well, and there was no need to worry too much. But some people believe that the saint suddenly lost consciousness and did not participate in the prayer meeting under the pretext of illness, which goes back to the original story. But did something really happen to the original Evelina that day, contrary to rumors? But suddenly, the lady remembered that she was supposed to meet the delegation, but she was told that they, too, had all returned back. The delegation also thought that the saint made an excuse because she didn't want to meet with them, and now the blonde has nothing to do. However, there is still someone who asks for an official meeting with her. The girl asked who would like to meet with her, but the priest said that this person was the Aphelios Empire. His Highness called the blonde boy to his place. Leon, the son of the emperor himself, found himself this boy. His Majesty ordered his son to go into the temple and find out what was happening there, to which he replied that he did not want to. To be honest, the guy thought it was quite boring, but his father insisted that Leon had no particularly important things to do these days, and he had just finished conquering Astia, and that was the point. The blonde's blood was still boiling, and he barely could spy on the temple. The man asked if he knew that the relationship between the saint and the captain of the knights was close to disaster. The son knew, but thought that their informants had encouraged them to do this. But recently, the girl's behavior has changed, and that's not all. The captain's position has also become uncertain. Blue Eyes suggested that they should try to motivate him themselves. And now the emperor was completely confident that his heir was determined to go there. He also recalled that, if necessary, any means of defense can be used. His Highness bowed, saying that he was carrying out the emperor's orders. The commander of the Rathbun Temple Knights was the strongest knight in the continent, as people said, but Leon himself had never met him. But if this is true, then it must belong to the Empire. After all, this knight deserves more than some temple, and if he finally quarrels with the saint, the blonde will lure him to his side, so it was worthwhile to hurry up with the implementation of his plan. The brunette was shocked that Leon was going to go with the delegation, but it was unofficial, so it was worth preparing fake IDs, to which he tried to explain that if Leon poisoned himself in this way, then nothing good would happen to the ceremony. Representatives from each country would come and start waving their swords. The advisor also suggested that this time the heir to the empire wants to meet with the saint. In this case, it's even great, because the guy thought it was time to take a break from the imperial ladies, because they say that the saint is very beautiful, but Leon is not the kind of person who likes to admire only her face. Of course, he has no aversion to beautiful women. He prefers interesting women. The more dangerous, the better. However, according to reports, she is just a hot-tempered and dissolute maiden. Therefore, the future emperor was not interested at all. Despite his words, he still wanted to meet the blonde because the situation had changed. Because the guy suddenly found out that Commander Rathbun was no longer guarding the saint. According to informants, this was the case, and it would seem that the situation has worsened. But on the contrary, this is good. Drive in 1 or 2 more wedges and that's the end of it. Speaking of saintly, the blonde wanted to make sure she changed men every night. Tom was wondering if she would like the blue-eyed blonde, meaning himself. There were no women in the Empire who didn't like Leon, but the advisor was more surprised that he suddenly began to disguise himself. But before he starts flirting with her, the blonde should look at her at least once. It was then, at the prayer meeting, that old man, with an unpleasant stench in his ears and rotten skin, was the same Leon who was watching everything that was happening. He watched the relationship between Rathbun and Evelina, realizing that they even dare to hold hands, although this relationship is close to disaster. So Leon was worried whether they had spent the night together. It was that blue-eyed blonde who caught the moment when many people from such a huge number of nations began to call the saint a dirty prostitute. But still, seeing a beautiful girl who, despite all the insults were flying in her direction, a real grandfather, whether he wanted to receive her blessings. The guy had no answers to how such a woman could, in such a situation, approach an old man who was dirty and stinking from illness. This gave the idea that the saint was completely different from what was written about her in the report. His Highness was very curious about her true image, and finally the long-awaited news arrived that the saint had agreed to an official reception. Finally, Leon arrived at the temple and came face to face with the blonde. The priest announced that the temple demands that the representative of the empire, Aphelios, maintain decorum. But suddenly, despite all the limits, the man will approach the girl, scaring her. He got down on one knee and kissed the lady's hand, to which she only remembered his voice and look. The girl suddenly immediately realized that Leon was the same old man at the prayer meeting. Despite the saint's shock, the future emperor grinned and said that he was Leon Harvel Aphelios. That is, the crown prince of the Aphelios Empire. At first glance, he seems stupid, but in fact he is a careful strategist, and also a rabid war fanatic. The guy announced that this time he really did the right thing by visiting the temple, not understanding why he didn't come to visit the girl earlier. If the blonde knew that the crown prince would be here, she would never have met him, because the empire only maintains politeness on the outside, but in reality, it is aimed at the temple. All the priests also looked worried. It was very impolite to appear like that, so the man said that he was very worried that he had behaved disdainfully towards the temple, since he was always glad that they had finally met. He also asked for forgiveness for not warning the lady earlier. Initially, he thought that it would be difficult for him to be present here due to being very busy with imperial affairs. But fortunately, the blonde had finished with his schedule and was able to join the delegation in a hurry. This was an outright lie, because such a busy person cannot appear in disguise at a prayer meeting, even if there is no evidence of it. This is an obvious lie. The man seemed to be saying with his gaze that even if it was a lie, the saint would not do anything. Blue Eyes stated that the best artisans of the empire, various jewelry and precious stones, were sent to the temple as donations. And the lady left without wearing any of this, so he concluded that the saint was not to his liking. All the priests noticed that this was very impudent, because this impudent man was openly sarcastic at the saint. Most likely this guy deliberately provoked the girl. If it had been the real Evelina, she would have immediately declared war on them. The blonde proudly stated that even if this was the case, she was going to give it to him after the meeting. But since jewelry and precious stones are not among the offerings that the temple can accept, the saint will return everything completely back to the empire. She made a gesture with her hand, after which her servants began to take away kilograms of gifts. The blue-eyed girl laughed that the prince should not worry about the wheat and grape wine that he sent for the people, since they were all gratefully received and put to good use. Leon had indeed prepared in advance, but this was not fleeting persistence or bluff. Then the girl concluded that their conversation had come to an end. Rising from her place, the saint prepared to leave so as not to intersect with this prince again. But he instantly jumped up, wanting to grab the blonde by the hair, when suddenly Rathbun stood between them. The man said that now it was time to prepare for the next meeting, to which the blonde turned to Prince Leon that, as he saw, she was running out of time, so at this point, the girl would take her leave. The blue-eyed one blessed him with peace on his way back to the Empire. For Leon, Evelina remained a beautiful and interesting woman. But suddenly, the man still took the lady's hand, giving the final answer. He stated that he intended to stay in the temple, that the saint herself, that the priest did not understand what was happening and was simply shocked by such impudence from the representative of the Empire. But the prince explained that during the time that he worked for the Empire, he committed many sins. Therefore, I decided that repentance and worship are the most necessary things for a person like him. That is why Leon wants to stay for a while longer in the temple, because he wants to be saturated with the overflowing grace of the saint, to such an extent that all his sins are washed away with holy water. The man said that next time, he would appreciate it if the saint would spend a little more time with him. After all this, the blonde thanked Rathbun for his help. In fact, she didn't have anything else on her schedule. She knew that he was worried about the lies being told, because this was not typical for Rathbun. This must be how he fulfills his duty as a knight commander. It would not be good if the meeting between the saint and the crown prince of the empire dragged on. Rathbun stated that his feelings told him that he was not a very good person, and the saint would be better off if she stayed away from him. The saint did not remember that the man had such a character that he was ready to directly show his emotions. But suddenly, seeing the smile on the blonde's face, the knight bowed down and apologized for crossing the line, although the lady was grateful for his concern for her. It's just that casual conversation with Rathbun makes her a little happy. If this goes on, then perhaps the girl will be able to change the ending on her own, unless it's all over in 4 days. The lady stated that the captain did a good job today, and she thinks that she no longer needs security for today. Until then, if the conditions put forward by Evelina are not met, then everything that the heroine has done, all her efforts, will come to an end. Since the saint had finished all her business for the day, the servants decided to prepare a bath for her. But she immediately refused to rest, asking her to bring the accumulated cases to her office. Sitting at work, Evelina remembered her real self, who shouted that the saint should not do this useless work. She understood that Evelina had previously opposed this. The girl hates that she is doing the work of a saint, however, this was not part of the conditions, so it is up to her to decide what to do and what not to do. The blonde kept in mind that she had only 4 days left before completing her tasks. The lady can't stand this unless she does something. She didn't understand where to get her a man, and damn, why is she making her do this? Because the girl has never even held hands with a real man, and now she has to spend the night with him. She reassured herself that she had to work now, even more and more, so as not to think about anything. The official list of candidates for the position of high priest has arrived. There were names that Evelina had never heard of, but when she saw a Carl on the lists, her whole body trembled and broke out in a cold sweat. It wasn't her, it was Evelina's excited state. The blue-eyed girl did not understand who Carl was and why she was so afraid of him. It's a little different from Karis, it's something darker and grimmer. There are 2 days left. Evelina's voice sounded like a morning alarm clock. In the morning, the saint was already met by a priest, who had heard that yesterday she went to bed late. But she replied that she had slept enough and thanked her for her concern. Yesterday, on the list of candidates for the post of high priest, she saw the name of Priest Carl. But the man only admired the fact that he was on the list. He stated that he missed him because he had not been in their area for a long time. Apparently, Carl is very good-natured if you think about it. Evelina drove almost all conscientious priests to the outskirts. He asked if the blonde was considering Carl as a priest. Although he is a little young, he definitely does not have a single flaw. At such a young age he became a respected high-ranking priest, because even a saint followed him once. This means that Evelina did not kick him out, but in any case it would be good if the lady asked for his return, regardless of the fact that the priest Carl himself wanted to go there. Even if he does not become the high priest, he will be of great help to the great temple. But the lady still felt tired, so she would like to rest a little more alone. The priest suddenly announced that he should have guessed this first, and also apologized. But the trembling in her hands did not leave Evelina's body, making her feel cold and surging fear. She couldn't even guess what happened to Priest Carl, although this is quite obvious to Evelina. She probably became close to people like Karis and heard something very unpleasant addressed to her from Priest Carl. Despite such a violent reaction, for some reason Evelina could not say anything. She simply pretended that she could see every moment. The saint was offered to rest, but she said that there was no need to worry. If she got tired, she would rest again. In fact, on the contrary, she is glad that she has a lot of work. Turning her attention to the table, the lady saw the seal of Ophelius and realized that it was sent by Crown Prince Leon. She began to think about what he could have put in this envelope, when suddenly it crumbled into many sakura petals. It was very beautiful, considering that the petals began to swirl in the air. The saint suddenly thought what nonsense he could have written to her in the letter, but it was written there that Leon was most surprised when he came to the big temple by the priests. And this morning, he was told that there is one thing in the empire that ladies hate most of all. The lady read this letter with a smile when she suddenly realized that she had just laughed at the letter from the crown prince. She had been told that his skill at charming people was amazing, and indeed it was. And also his experience with women was very impressive. However, despite his numerous affairs with women, not one of them bore a child from him. This meant that Leon was a rather cautious person. With a scary person like him, it was impossible for anything to go according to her plan. The blonde himself had already asked 27 times whether a reply letter had arrived from the saint, but she did not give an answer. The man thought it was because he was the crown prince of the empire. The situation became very confusing just because of Leon's statement. The prince thought that the reply letter would arrive soon, when suddenly his window was broken and a man burst in. He did not expect that he would not receive the letter, so he grabbed the corpse of some young man. Most likely, he came to deliver a reply letter, because Leon had a plan. Since the crown prince of the empire has quietly settled in one place, then this is an opportunity that no one can miss, and it would be foolish if he said that anyone other than the temple knights was prohibited from having daggers in his possession. The advisor vowed that he would do his best. However, the young man's expectations were not met, and now he cannot wait. The man's heart was pounding with anticipation. He thought that war and women were uncontrollable fun. Now it was time to get down to business more fully. The current influence of the Great Temple must pass into the hands of the Empire. It would be easier to take everything by force, but then people will vehemently resist this. Instead, Leon will lower the status of the saint, the symbol of the Great Temple, and he will lure the commander of the Knights of the Temple, Rathbun, to his side. If the Great Temple loses its sword and shield, it will collapse. He was lucky that Evelina was an easily accessible woman with a lot of shortcomings. Thanks to this, even one small rumor can develop into a big scandal. So soon the reaction will follow. No matter what she does, this place will definitely end up at the feet of the Emperor. Or there is an easier way for this. Perhaps like with Leon's mother, it is worth ending this. Give her a marriage proposal as well as a wedding gift, because of which Leon's mother only cursed his father. His mother's country, which held out until the very end, was eventually united with the empire through marriage. It would not be bad if this method worked with the Great Temple, so the man wondered whether the saint could get married. It seems that physical integrity is not important to the saint, the blonde thought, suddenly seeing Commander Rathbun. He heard that his faith and devotion are so deep that he is ready to easily sacrifice his life for the sake of the Great Temple of the saint. The moment a man sees the saint's true face, he will give up his status as captain of the Temple Knights without a single regret. The guy approached the commander, saying that he was very glad that they had met. Besides, he wanted to say something, but he didn't understand why the man was looking so hostile. The girl woke up with Evelina's voice in her head, which announced that she had one day left. The last routine, the last work, the path of the great saint is coming to an end. The priests said that it seems that the lady is almost finished with all the urgent matters, and she may already be done for today. She wanted to work even more, but the servants said that the blonde might lose consciousness again, so they left her in the room. Blue-Eyed was very afraid that she would soon be gone, but she remembered that she still had some time. She wanted to run away when she suddenly realized that she didn't even have anywhere to go. The girl suddenly wondered what it would be like to die a second time, whether it hurt or the blonde would just disappear. Time was running out, and Evelina still didn't know anything. Strange marks on her thigh did not give the saint peace. Who was the priest Carl and why Evelina was like this? She couldn't stand a lot of work and was an annoying woman. If the blonde told her that she would be burned again, then maybe she would give her more time. She will tell you that at the moment of death there will be no one on her side and that everyone will rejoice at her death. Tears appeared in her eyes from just the thought, which is why the lady wanted to keep herself busy, because really, she would die like this, thinking about these terrible things. Deciding that the saint could no longer bear this, so leaving the room, the girl rushed to run. The blonde screamed not to be followed, and the priests were never able to catch up with her. While she was running into the unknown, it was too scary because there was only 1 hour left. The blue-eyed girl wanted to live so much that she screamed that Evelina had nothing to regret in her life. Therefore, she didn't understand why she couldn't just give it to her. Tears flowed like a river, either from fear or from a strong desire to live. Evelina's condition stated that it didn't matter who it was, so right now, the saint must find someone. Suddenly, the blonde heard someone's voice, the voice of someone who noticed her crying. It was Leon who came up and asked what Saint Evelina was doing here. The man approached her again and asked what the girl was doing here at such a late time. He noticed that the blonde was crying, so he offered to become her interlocutor for a while. He didn't know what happened to the girl, but he would like to console her. His room is just nearby. The man immediately warned that he does not have any ulterior motives, so there is no need to worry, because he uses this room with his assistants. Lost in thought, the lady took the blonde man's hand, saying that she did not agree with him. Pulling Leon's hand, Evelina led the prince somewhere, continuing to hold his hand. The rooms on this side are used mainly as overnight accommodation for delegations, so most of them are now empty. The commander asked what the situation with the crown prince was. He was told that, as he had said, they had strengthened security near the prince's room, to which Rathbun ordered to ensure that such an unpleasant situation as yesterday did not happen again. Leon Harvalophilius is a man whose true intentions are unknown. Everyone knows the fact that the Empire is targeting the Great Temple, and in such a situation, he thinks that he can brazenly linger in the Great Temple. The man wondered what the prince could be up to, when suddenly it dawned on him that he was more annoyed by the fact that he was interfering with the saint. If there is no direct harm to the saint, then there is no point in interfering. Therefore, the commander asked, "Come to think of it, isn't Sidel the one in charge of guarding the saint today?" To which the guy replied that she cancelled this evening's schedule, saying that she would be in the room, relaxing alone. The knight didn't understand it himself, but for some reason he came to the saint's room. We had to return when suddenly the priest shouted that thank God Rathbun was nearby. They said that the saint had gone somewhere. They had to keep an eye on her. So they apologized, because she said not to follow her. She screamed just as terribly as before. So Rathbun had to understand what would happen if they will not obey her. To which the man asked to keep this a secret and volunteered to help with the search for the saint. The girl, in turn, led the prince into that very room and closed the doors behind her. Suddenly the saint said very strange things, or rather asked to sleep with her, and to the boy's shock she replied that he really didn't want to. But Leon only took the girl by the waist and asked what she would do if he suddenly refused. The man assumed that the blonde would run out into the street and look for someone else, but the long-haired one had no idea why he would care. The prince said that he had listened to rumors, but did not think that the blue-eyed girl would be so brave. Realizing that the time given by the real saint was already running out, the girl simply said that if Leon agreed, then let him act faster. The man said that he had no idea that the lady could be so impatient, so he grabbed her by the cheeks and instantly pulled her into a kiss. When her lips were covered with someone else's, Evelina was covered with red paint, and she froze because it was her first kiss. When she read about it in a book, it seemed to her like something more tender and deep. But now, everything is different. It felt like her partner was trying to eat her, but he instantly stated that he had heard that the saint was quite experienced in this. The blonde grinned and apologized, because it seems that the lady is not what they say about her, but she only asked to start faster and without foreplay. The prince noticed that the lady was trembling and shaking all over, which was the same thing, but it looked as if it was her first time. Picking her up in his arms, the man laid her on the bed, asking if she would regret choosing him. Taking off his outer robe, the blonde began to kiss her neck, making her feel strange. Rathbun kept trying to find the girl, not understanding why he was so worried about her. Meanwhile, in the process of completing her task, the saint heard Evelina's voice saying that these are the conditions and there is no need to cry. The lady understood that right now the real heroine was watching them. Suddenly, the set signal sounded in the girl's ears. Finally, time was up, but the heroine was still alive. And finally, it was all over, and she had to go back. The saint suddenly pushed him away from her, but he continued to make fun of her and embarrass her. The man asked if the blonde was really planning to finish everything at once, but she abruptly began to push him away from her. Thanking the prince for his help, the girl expressed her regrets and quickly left his chambers. She understood that right now, with her whole body, she felt alive, and it was still her body. But in an instant, the long-haired girl turned around and noticed that Leon was running after her, when suddenly she didn't notice and crashed into Rathbun. Seeing the man, the blonde was even more overwhelmed by the fear of hopelessness. Seeing the crimson marks on the saint's chest, the man became furious and realized whose hands it was. Rathbun thought that Leon had done this by force, so he took out a sword and wanted to personally punish the culprit, to which the girl asked not to do this. She stated that it was a misunderstanding and she was just going to her room. The lady covered her face with her hands and asked both men to leave her. The commander, in turn, took offering to carry her to the room and also announced that this was a matter, he would not just leave her. Instantly, the blonde realized that it wasn't even a trap since the girl stood up for him. But he did not understand what had happened because the saint had definitely abandoned him and ran away. She protected him from an attack from the captain of the knights. Her offer was tempting and the man accepted it. Leon forever remembered that face, that aroma, and that feeling. The prince had never felt this way before, and it seemed that until the blonde made her his, this thirst would never go away. After all these adventures, the blonde decided to take a bath. Bathroom, soap, towels, a modest but neat and tidy bathroom, like the character of the owner, because the girl came to Rathbun's apartment and takes a bath. But she couldn't immediately go to her room like that. The lady suddenly realized that everything was not as bad as she thought. Although it hurt a little, just like muscle pain after training, everything was just fine. Thanks to Prince Leon in her, his touch was intense, but at the same time soft and affectionate. It seems that the man got angry because the saint used the person for her benefit and ran away, but his pestering her all this time was for the same purpose. He got what he wanted. Now let her return to the empire because the blonde is embarrassed to see him, so it would be good if he disappeared. Suddenly, Rathbun showed up and brought clean towels and a change of clothes. They were worn but clean clothes. In the end, the beauty came out wearing the items given to her, thanking Rathbun for the clothes. The man bowed and apologized for not having suitable clothes for her, so he gave her his old ones. Hearing that the saint was not angry at all, he turned away and said that he would take her into the room. But instantly, the blonde took the commander's hand, saying that it was already late, and also suggested that they first drink a cup of tea and then go. Seeing Rathbun's embarrassed face, she realized that it must be too late. Turning away, the girl whispered that in this case it would really be better to return, but the commander sharply refused. He actually went to make tea, and the blonde thought what she would say when the man returned. The saint has already cleaned up the mess, but Rathbun doesn't really ask her anything. But he always, even silently, remains on the side of the saint. Next to him, this atmosphere for some reason seems very comfortable, but the knight himself seemed to feel completely different due to the fact that he had broken so many rules. At that moment, he could not bear this sight. Rathbun didn't understand why the saint was with that freak, because he thought that now she had changed, but was she really spending time with men again? But then, she was definitely running away. If so, then maybe this prince forced her to spend time with him in this way. Returning with a tray on which the tea was already cooling, the man noticed that the saint had fallen asleep. He sat down next to her, right on the floor, and grabbed his head, sighing heavily. The blonde herself had a dream, or rather the real Evelina. She stated that she did not even think that such a quiet person would decide to complete her tasks. The lady wanted to run after Evelina, when suddenly she noticed that her hands were in another body. These were not her hands. It seemed that she was again in Evelina's body, which made the tears flow simply like a stream. The saint laughed, and then said that it was much better this way, calling the heroine obscene. She said that if she can exist and live with this body, then spreading her legs should not be a problem for any man. But the lady suddenly shouted that she had fulfilled the condition, as they had agreed, and now it was her body. To which the blonde only laughed, and then congratulated the new heroine of her novel. The blonde approached the blue-eyed girl and took her by the hair, asking what she was going to do with this body. After all, since she got to know the taste of a man, then, most likely, according to Evelina's assumptions, she is going to do this to the fullest. The real one would be very disappointed if the heroine was going to waste her time in vain. But the girl did not understand why not, because she would try with all her might to act like a saint. Blue Eyes tried hard, which is why everyone liked her. Unlike a real saint, but since the lady worked as a saint instead of her, she was interested in something. The saint grabbed Evelina by the shoulders and asked who Carl was, but the girl began to shout that she should not have heard that name. It seems that the heroine has found Evelina's weak point. She is not at all aware of how the lady found out about Carl. She does not follow every moment. But if you use this well, you can absolutely free yourself from her. The blonde began to guess that this was her secret lover, because everyone said that she carefully watched him. Suddenly, Evelina grabbed the depressed girl by the neck, threatening to kill her, but she had to let the girl go. She stated that she would not have to get her hands dirty, because she had already received a letter, the same one that burned immediately after reading it. The blue-eyed one said that it would be more painful than dying, because now she would have to bear the offspring of the beast. After these words, the saint woke up in a cold sweat. and Evelina's last words seemed to echo in her head. They said that she wanted to see if the heroine could smile next time. The blonde heard strange sounds, but realized that the girl told her that she would bear the offspring of the beast. Looking around, the girl didn't even understand where she suddenly was, because she didn't fall asleep here. An unfamiliar, but at the same time familiar smell came from the corridor. Suddenly, it dawned on the saint that she was in Rathbun's bed. This is problematic because it is already dawn, and the girl has been away for too long, so she began to look for the commander of the temple knights, thinking that he was sleeping in the next room. This was indeed the case, but the man did not sleep, but waited for the holy morning. He still hadn't slept, which is why the lady began to apologize, because he looked frozen. The brown-haired man said that he wanted to escort the blonde to her room. The girl returned safely and quite quietly. The priests guarding the door were forbidden to go inside, so there was no need to worry about that. The saint suddenly realized that her bodyguard was taking care of her. She thought that their relationship had finally gotten better. In fact, he was probably ready to explode. But so much had happened between them in a short time, it would be necessary to return his clothes as soon as possible. If other people saw the lady like this, it should never happen, so the blue-eyed girl decided to hide the clothes well and secretly return them. It was the beginning of an ordinary day, and the girl was informed that a letter had arrived from Laris today. It seems that there really were no rumors about last night, which was very lucky. In fact, if you think about Evelina in the past, it doesn't really matter. If Iris appears, the lady will not be able to avoid being banished. First of all, she must avoid being burned at the stake. In any case, she needs to prepare in advance so that the girl can live outside the temple after the holy power disappears. But she knew nothing about life outside the temple, and this will arouse suspicion. A secret passage behind the wardrobe leads outside the temple. We must somehow find a case and check everything in advance. In order not to delay the union, you will have to disguise yourself, and the money, the girl is sorry, but it looks like she will have to take some of the saint's jewelry. Instantly, a maid burst into Evelina, saying that an urgent check was needed, but suddenly the girl tripped and dropped all the documents, falling. The lady broke her head and apologized for staining the documents with blood. The saint wished that she could use divine power at that moment. But still, the blonde's hands really began to heal, which was a great honor for the sacred servant. The holy power appeared at the will of the girl, and until Iris appeared, she could use this power. What a blessing. All this time there were many dangerous moments because the blue-eyed girl could not use her power. Quite a long time had passed since no one had seen her in the temple. Now it will be easier to explore the boundaries of the great temple, she thought, when suddenly she was informed that Prince Leon was urgently asking for an audience. The blonde asked me to convey that now she cannot accept his audience, but his voice was heard from the corridor, which said that Leon would not go anywhere until he met the saint. The priests tried to explain to him that he could not enter without permission, and also asked the girl, just in case, to leave this place. But the blue-eyed girl did not understand whether Prince Leon was such a character, or whether he was angry because of yesterday. Then, the blue-eyed girl wondered if the prince was going to use this as an excuse to attack the great temple. The saint announced that she would meet with him so that he would calm down. She was persuaded not to do this, but Evelina understood that it was she who provoked Prince Leon and must take responsibility. When the doors opened, the lady saw Rathbun, who was trying to stop the prince, and also asked the girl to stay behind his back. The blonde said that this was absurd because the saint came out on her own, but her path was blocked. Only the commander of the knights exceeds his authority, but he replied that it is the duty of the commander of the knights to protect the saint in danger. But the blue-eyed man laughed, saying that indeed his beauty was a little dangerous. He called himself unscrupulous, ridiculing the entire charter of this great temple. Evelina suddenly realized that the man was deliberately trying to provoke Rathbun. She understood that if the guy continued to argue like that, a war would start. This could not be allowed, so the blonde asked to stop, interrupting the conversation between the two men. Blue Eyes ordered Commander Rathbun to move back a little because he was blocking the way. The girl invited Crown Prince Leon to come in because they had something to talk about. After this, the lady ordered them to be left alone, showing where the prince could go. The lady decided that she would explain everything to the man later, but now everything needs to be settled. Now the priority is to stop the Crown Prince. The blonde sat down opposite, crossing his arms over his chest, and then looked at the saint. He was originally targeting the temple, perhaps planning to use last night as an excuse. But the long-haired one wasn't going to leave it like that. But she didn't know how to start a conversation when suddenly they both started talking about yesterday. In this case, since Leon interrupted Evelina, he yielded to her. asking her to speak first. The blonde stated that yesterday was completely her fault and she sincerely apologized. But she didn't know that such one-night entertainment was not uncommon for the crown prince of the empire. Therefore, the blue-eyed one would be grateful if such a mistake does not happen again. But suddenly, the man said that the girl mistakenly considered him a frivolous person, and it seems that the blonde, on the contrary, has put her even more on the hostile side. This was wrong from the start. No matter how urgent it was, she shouldn't have touched this man. Because this man is too dangerous. He won't ask about what happened yesterday, but what the girl's goals were. Only, like last night, if the saint needs someone again, then she can definitely come and visit him. Taking Evelina's hand, Leon kissed her, saying that he wanted to get to know her more. The priests were discussing the fact that Prince Leon was throwing himself at everyone, and no one understood what they were going to do. And by the way, this was the first time everyone had seen the commander so nervous. He actually looked not only nervous but also angry. The man left the room and passed by Rathbun, saying that he had to wait a long time. All the people were already shouting for Crown Prince Leon to stop being rude and be polite. But he just smiled and came closer to the knight. He also whispered that if Rathbun had any wits, then it was better for him to understand everything and disappear. His hands clenched, and the prince left the premises, putting his hands in his pockets, leaving the man burning with anger. The lady was sitting at the table and writing something, at the same time thinking about what Prince Leon had recently told her. She did not understand what this meant, assuming that he wanted to date her and build some kind of relationship. The blonde was too excited, so she almost banged her head on the table. She recalled his words that if she needed someone again, like last night, then she should definitely come and visit him. Most likely the man just wanted Evelina's body. Leaving the room, the girl asked what was happening, to which she received the answer that High Priest Dalen seemed to be going into eternal sleep. He spent a long time in bed due to old age. Everyone knew that the saint continued to avoid this man, but now he really had little time left, in which case she asked if the priest was really worried that she might regret it. Evelina would categorically refuse to meet this man. High priests are different from ordinary priests. They can find out that she is not the real Evelina. Now he really doesn't have much time left. But seeing how worried people were around the saint, she did not think that they had a hostile attitude towards her. Deciding that the girl would meet him, she set off. It was interesting what kind of person High Priest Dalen is. Not much can be learned from Evelina's memories. If you think about it, the lady has not seen Rathbun since that day. Most likely he is deliberately avoiding her, but Evelina wanted to explain everything. As the blonde walked past the worshipping knights, she addressed one of them. The blue-eyed girl asked if the priest knew where the commander of the Knights Ratban of the Holy Temple was. They immediately began to arrive in shock, due to the fact that Evelina never cared about where he was. Sidel suddenly asked what the saint was going to do when she saw their commander, because he did not understand why the saint was personally looking for the captain of the knights. Of course, he apologized for his rudeness, but standing up, he repeated his question. Evelina forgot that initially, this is how people treated her. If not for the duty to protect the saint, most likely Rathbun would have treated her that way too. There were too many eyes on the lady, she couldn't just leave it like that. For rudeness, as punishment, the girl called on the knight to exclude him from the squad for a period of 1 month. Since such behavior is not befitting a knight, during this period, the punished person is prohibited from using a knightly uniform and sword. A friend of that same idiot abruptly forced him to bow, thanking the girl for his generosity. In any case, if things are not explained properly, saying that they were delayed, the blonde told the priests that they were in a hurry. The man began to beat and scold Sidel for the fact that he not only hated the saint, he dared to say it out loud. If so, then he could leave knighthood and not waste time. Fortunately, the girl has become more gentle lately. The boy simply didn't understand why no one from the knights noticed. A captain who constantly appears unstable and a saint who endlessly calls him out. The man was sure that this woman was seducing the commander. He was completely sure that this dirty prostitute would not let Rathbun go. The saint arrived where she was supposed to and was thanked for her presence. She was led to where the high priest is. The lady thanked the saint for the visit, but the high priest was now barely conscious. He was quite old and could barely breathe. The girl was too unusual because she had felt it many times, the smell of the body of a person close to death. The saint said that she would stay here for a while and asked everyone to leave this room. When the priests did not hear or understand what the lady wanted to say, she again shouted these words to them so that they would leave. They agreed and immediately left the premises. She approached the dying body and lightly crossed herself. The blonde did not know what kind of relationship she had with Evelina. However, even now there are a lot of memories that she is not aware of. The girl decided that she should find out all her secrets. Holy power, the power representing God, it can heal wounds, poisons, infectious diseases, and can be used to defend against attacks, but it is said that it cannot stop natural aging and death. And yet, the saint thought that she could try it once. She didn't know if it would work, but she would like to. I would like to talk to this person just a little bit. Seeing that there was no reaction, the blonde sighed without any hope. But suddenly, she heard the old woman begin to breathe. Gray immediately recognized the appearance of St. Evelina, smiling at her. The long-haired woman said that they had not seen each other for a long time, when suddenly, the high priest immediately announced that she was not the real St. Evelina. In general, it was surprising that the old woman did not die and was still alive, but here she was surprised. The lady also did not understand why death never came, as childhood memories suddenly appeared in her head. The saint did not understand why Evelina treated the high priest this way. In her childhood memories, it seemed that they got along well. She tried to understand what happened between them, but the grandmother only asked the girl to raise her for a while. She said that she was sorry that she had occupied the position for a long time and could not fully fulfill her duties. Now it was true that she felt like time was running out. Her hands continued to shake, despite the blonde's efforts with holy strength. In the end, she only gained a little time. The high priest addressed the saint, saying that the next chief priest should be someone who can serve the saint well. The woman asked if maybe Evelina had already made up her mind. The blue-eyed girl realized that this old woman was sincerely worried about Evelina and the entire great temple. The lady suddenly replied that many people recommend Priest Carl, but the woman only began to cry, announcing that the girl had finally made peace with the Priest Carl. Longhaired understood that she needed to find out more because she needed to find out what happened to the priest Carl. Choking with tears, the woman said that this was a very good decision, and now she had peace of mind. The two of them will certainly restore their previous relationship, as she said. And she hoped that they would return again to those wonderful and peaceful times. That day, the high priest, after all this conversation, died. They say she died less than an hour after Evelina left. The old woman closed her eyes with a mind face, for which everyone was grateful to the saint. It is important to mourn, but we must quickly make a decision about the next high priest. Everyone agreed, because the girl had to call everyone to choose a new one. As everyone knew, there were many high-ranking priests serving in different continents, but not all had returned yet. This is true, but it was impossible to just sit. At least we should discuss the candidates. There were almost no sincere mourners. Most of the people sitting here were urged by Caras Eveline. Some people recommended the priest Erden, although he has a very bad reputation. But suddenly someone nominated Priest Carl as a candidate. It seems that no one was even against such a statement. But the blonde was sure that there would be those who would not like it. Therefore, the saint asked to send a letter to the priest Carl, who served on the outskirts, and to come with the message to the great temple. The girl walked around the temple and wondered if there was a melting place. Tat remembered that she had to meet someone in the 4th room of the 3rd floor. Although he lived in the Great Temple, he still knew little about this place. He went inside and dashingly apologized for being late. He assumed that the man was busy with the funeral of the high priest and was very grateful to her that he found time to meet with him. Prince Leon clearly prepared for this meeting and even made tea. The man said, in fact, he really wanted to meet this priest. And also asked, wasn't it this guy who recently helped the wounded knights of the Leon Empire? But the guy said that he stated that caring for the sick is the responsibility of all priests. And yet, the fact that their knights, who were in great danger, were able to return safely to the empire, all thanks to the priest Ladis. The girl had heard rumors that the crown prince of the empire was very arrogant, but to her, he seemed very polite. The blonde asked not to reject his sincerity, even if it was not so significant. But suddenly, the man took out some kind of box, driving the lady crazy with curiosity. Having opened it, the priest was truly disappointed when she saw an ordinary stone. It would seem that Leon was simply mocking, but this stone was picked up by the knights, who were cured by the divine power of the priest when they returned from Astia as a gift to her. The grey-haired woman covered her face with her hand in surprise when she realized the significance of this gift. As he already said, this is not significant, but he will be very grateful if the girl accepts this gift. Astia's special product was the opal gemstone. There were no words, although even in such a size it did not have great significance. The blue-eyed prince bent down in front of the maiden and, smiling, addressed her by name. He said that if she became a high priest, she would always remember his gratitude. The lady blushed all over from the mere thought that the entire empire, including the crown prince, supported her, and they are confident in her endeavors as a high priest. Sighing, the man threw his jacket onto the chair. The girl said that she trusts Mr. Leon no matter what he does. But suddenly, the blonde again received some kind of letter, which the advisor pointed out to him. He undoubtedly expected this because this is a letter from His Majesty the Emperor. Of course, the man expected this. He left for the Great Temple without even warning, and most likely the father wrote for his heir to return immediately. The prince did not want to return home with all his might, and even thought that he was going crazy. As expected, the emperor is aware of everything, and his father's positive service is as amazing as always. The prince didn't care about the others, but one of them would become the high priest. Using anything and anyone within Leon's power, he must keep Evelina in his grasp. In a few minutes they will accompany the saint to the cremation ceremony, but for now she can rest. The girl was indeed very tired. It was a high-level meeting and she wanted to fire everyone like Karas. What was more frightening was the realization that Priest Karl would soon return. If he was appointed high priest and left here, since Evelina was afraid of him, perhaps she would not appear again. But what bothered her was the fear she felt at the mention of his name. The lady tried to understand or simply remember what happened between Evelina and Karl. But suddenly the blonde was struck by severe pain, causing her hands to tremble again and a nasty shiver to run through her skin. Looking at her thigh, she saw dents. This had definitely happened before. This strange mark only caused severe pain, and it was definitely not a natural wound. Previously, after some time, the pain subsided on its own, so the saint decided that she would endure it for a while. She didn't know what it was. If there was someone else, she would have immediately healed with her divine power, but the saint could not heal on her own. And even with so much power, it was useless now. Having tried to heal herself with her charms, the lady noticed that the holy power began to come out of this mark. It felt like, on the contrary, this mark was sucking divine power inside, but it didn't feel like healing. At the funeral, they said about the high priest that she was God's favorite child. Everyone wished their benevolent woman to rest in peace. The last day of the funeral ritual for High Priest Dalen. Now they will send her to God with prayers and fire. The girl mentally blessed this old woman and said goodbye to her. In the beautiful flames that give peace to the dead, the high priest disappeared. The saint could not hold back her tears and the pain in her feet as she saw off the old woman on her only path. She should not forget about the last minutes of the life of the false saint. That's right. This couldn't go on any longer. The girl had to restore her relationship with Rathbun. Although they had not seen each other all this time, he must have come for the ritual. The blonde began to look around at everyone, when suddenly she found a man who was also looking at her. When the saint looked at him, he immediately looked away. The situation has become much worse, which is what Evelina thought. It's obvious that Rathbun hates the saint and she didn't know what to do. Well, first they should have given him back his clothes, which the guard had lent to the saint a long time ago. And when the opportunity arises, the lady will tell him about that matter. If you go through the secret passage, the girl can get there without meeting anyone. Since everyone here wears the same mourning clothes, even if someone sees them, they probably won't recognize them. The saint was very lucky because the Rathbun residence was recently built with sponsorship. But instantly, having walked a little further, the lady realized that there was someone there. Having passed by, the girl was carried by and no one recognized her, although she almost got into a lot of trouble. No one would have thought that the saint would wander alone like this, especially since her face was covered. But what would happen if the saint was caught secretly sneaking into the house of the captain of the knights, which she should not have allowed? Finally, the saint arrived at the place when suddenly she heard someone's voice ordering her to stop. The man asked who was trying to get to the captain's house, ordering him to give his name. In front of the saint stood Sidel, who for some reason was near the knight's house. The girl tried to run away, but he immediately grabbed her, preventing her from leaving. Having thrown off her disguise, the man immediately realized that this was Saint Evelina. He stated that he even strongly expected this to happen. The guy began to say that simply seducing the captain was not enough, so Evelina came here in the middle of the night, noticing that she even brought a change of clothes, calling her stupid and depraved. Grabbing the girl by the throat, Sidel began shouting something. He was sure that the lady thought that she had deceived everyone, but she was mistaken because he had long seen her rotten essence. The hand tightened around someone else's throat, cutting off the ability to breathe. The blue-eyed girl whispered to him to stop because she began to choke. Instantly, divine power made its way up, thereby pushing the knight away from itself. This was the protective barrier working. The blonde was even afraid that this impudent man could die, and did not know what to do with herself out of despair. She began to look for at least someone, but Rathbun himself appeared behind her. She went to his house, but he only asked if the girl was okay. The long-haired girl looked into her cup of tea, afraid to utter a word. My hands were shaking, and the tea itself was beginning to cool. The blonde asked if that knight had died, but Rathbun replied that she should not worry, because he had a slight concussion, and thanks to the power of the saint, no one would die, because she knew this better than anyone. The man bowed deeply and again asked for forgiveness. Brown said that as soon as Sidel wakes up, he will suffer the appropriate punishment, and Rathbun will expel him from the squad of knights. To which the blue-eyed girl sighed, feeling guilty for this. The knight of the temple, obliged to protect the saint since he attacked her, will be punished. The girl said that she hoped they would handle this as quietly as possible so that no one else would find out. The girl continued to blame herself for everything, thinking that this would not have happened if only she had not come to Rathbun's house. The blonde suddenly looked at the commander and began to apologize for this. She justified herself, with tears on her cheeks, that she was going to come and go quietly, just to give things away. Tears were already falling like hail, which is why the saint covered her face. The man approached her and asked why she was crying, starting to wipe away her tears with his hand. Their gazes finally met, but Rathbun literally knelt before the saint due to his height. Blue Eyes said that she was sorry that she ruined someone else's clothes. The brown-haired man asked to stop apologizing because the girl could simply throw away these clothes. But the lady said that she would never do this, when suddenly the knight saw the wounds on the girl's neck, shouting that she was hurt because she did not use the holy power earlier. He bowed to her because it was his mistake, as the captain of the knights, and asked to punish him. But the blonde opposite this said that everything was wrong. She assumed that the man must have been very angry with her all this time. Now the lady realized that she could ask him honestly. The blue-eyed girl looked at the knight and asked if he advised to stay away from the crown prince, since she did not listen if he was angry with her. Rathbun stated that he could not be angry with the saint, and he was not angry with her at all, but with Prince Leon. The girl asked why he was angry with him because he didn't seem to do anything to him. But the brown-haired man only replied that he represented a danger to the saint in the great temple. The lady really thought all the time that the man hated her, but he said that he was never angry with her, although that was a lie. Rathbun simply did not understand at what point his attitude towards the saint changed so dramatically. The captain promised that this would never happen. The long-haired woman thanked the man, since he personally promises, now it is impossible to refuse words. The blonde dreamed that the end of this novel would be exactly like this. After all, even if Evelina turns out to be a fake saint, it's okay, but the guard was still thinking about his punishment. Because in addition to the security mistakes during the prayer meeting, today's incident was also his fault. But instantly, the girl raised her hand and asked if the man was ready to accept the punishment. She stated that then, due to incidents of failure to protect the saint, he would receive appropriate punishment. Now, from now on, Rathbun comes to the saint 3 times a week to teach her how to use a sword. The saint could not become like a knight by herself. However, if he learns at least simple self-defense techniques, that would be great. Later, when the girl leaves the Great Temple, her self-defense skills will be very useful to her. And under the pretext of studying, the lady wanted to get a little closer to Rathbun. The girl asked to take care of her, to which the commander only agreed to such a punishment. If they get closer like this step by step, then he probably won't allow the saint to be burned at the stake, as in the original. Of course, later he would be on Iris's side, but still the lady hoped that he would not turn his back on her completely, even when Evelina became no longer a saint. Returning to her room, the blonde plopped down on her bed. She kept thinking that she returned very late, because it was either 2 or 3 in the morning. The lady was tired, but still, today she felt a little closer to Rathbun. The girl covered herself with a blanket, starting to sleep, when suddenly she was awakened by a tall silhouette. The blonde was very surprised that the man was able to climb to the 5th floor through the window. The long-haired man looked at the saint, calling her by name. This was Aslan, the king of magicians and also the 3rd male protagonist. Waking up, the saint asked what he was doing here. Red-haired asked if the saint had received the letter he sent. The blue-eyed girl began to remember about the letter that disappeared immediately after reading it. It was written there that now the deal was concluded, and he would soon be with her. The girl suddenly jumped up and began asking what the deal was and what it meant. But the man only grabbed her by the legs, saying that the deal was that the saint would become his female. The male bent down in front of her and smiled at all sounds. The blue-eyed girl couldn't believe her eyes. What this man was saying was simply crazy. This man was not quite human. He smelled of danger, and the girl realized that now she needed to run. The blonde tried to hit the psycho and also run away. But the red one simply grabbed her legs again, trying to hold her back. The man declared that the saint was his female, which he barely got. Red Eyes said that there was no longer any reason to wait, and from now on he would fill the girl from the inside again and again. And so on until the lady becomes pregnant with his child, when suddenly the saint remembered Evelina's words that she would have to bear the beast's child. The rapist said that the blonde could not refuse because she had already made a promise. Taking his victim by the chin and turning her to face him, the man reminded that Evelina was preparing her body so that it could accept him. She was supposed to drink tea, which was a medicine that helps resist his magical powers, but the lady already smelled of readiness. The deal was completed because Evelina had previously agreed to it. Now even if the blue-eyed girl makes a face like she doesn't know anything, it won't work. He asked for forgiveness because he could wait no longer. After all, his patience is completely running out. The saint remembered again Evelina's words that this girl herself wanted this body, and now she feels severe pain from violence to which she did not give consent. If so, the saint must accept everything, both life with this body and the deal made with this body. The crying woman again heard Evelina's voice, which she so wanted to banish. The lady felt incredibly painful under someone else's weight. It was impossible to leave it like that, because if it continues, then it's all over. The rapist only stated that it exceeded his expectations, and in fact, she will bear him a child and become his female. The man was worried that it might not work out at once and decided to do it again. The blonde suddenly screamed at him to stop, but he just said that nothing had worked out yet, and when the child appears, you can feel it. Therefore, they cannot stop. The deal said that he would do this as many times as necessary. Instantly, the saint lost consciousness, to which the man snorted that it was not necessary for her to be conscious. The red-haired man lay down next to him and tried to bring the lady to consciousness. He sincerely did not understand why the saint was having such a hard time, although perhaps Evelina drank little tea. He was clearly annoyed that people were too weak, by the way. The first condition of the deal was getting rid of the marks on his thigh. This is a very old curse that devours the powers of its owner. In a great temple where holy powers are concentrated, it is very strange to see something like that on the body of the saint herself. But he can get rid of such things with one movement. The male was very surprised that the saint could not even tolerate this. This is a problem because it is now taking away her holy power. But soon the girl's life will become a target. In the end, it will all end with the death of the owner of the mark, a very terrible curse. But the man promised that he would somehow solve this, because now she is his female. The captain was informed that Seidel was missing and did not seem to be there last night, saying that they would find and bring him. This guy was on probation, so Rathbun turned him down. He said that Seidel had lost his knighthood and they would not see him again. The knights knew that one day he would cause a big problem, but what did he do that he lost his status? The captain spoke calmly, but his soul must have been hard. And they guys create a lot of problems with gossip. The man suddenly asked what was happening to his commander because it seemed strange to him that he smiled for the first time. He replayed Evelina's words in his head that they should meet in her room during the day, but time passed too slowly. Deciding that the knight could in principle go early, he went to the temple. While the man was still on the way, he thought about what to teach the saint first. Considering that she has no basic physical strength, she should have started with self-defense techniques. But the girl can still prevent danger with her holy power. Rathbun wondered why then she asked him for this. Maybe there is another reason that she did not tell him about, but no, it was necessary to get rid of such thoughts, because a man can only faithfully carry out her orders. But suddenly, going outside, he notices Crown Prince Leon, not understanding why this freak is here again. The man remembered the situation when he saved the saint, thinking that Leon was hanging around the saint again. The blonde announced that he had come to see the saint anyway. The future emperor asked what Rathbun was doing here then, saying that when a person asks, one must answer. But suddenly, they were both reminded that they were in front of the saint's residence, so they were required to remain silent. The commander apologized, although there was no need to talk to this man. The man only asked to convey his words to the girl that he had arrived to fulfill his promise to her. But the men were informed that none of them would be able to have an audience with the saint. She's busy, so they'll have to wait a little. Suddenly they realized that there was someone in the blonde's room. The captain sensed the evil and powerful power of the demon beast, so he could not wait long and ran to save the girl. He started knocking on doors and shouting if everything was okay with the blonde. Finally, the saint came to her senses, which made the beast very happy. The lady looked at her rapist and said that she really didn't remember anything. The demon did not understand what he should do, because the girl clearly did not understand what kind of contract she had entered into. The man began to use spatial magic, saying that things were bad, when after everything she said that she did not remember anything. It was obviously high-level magic, and he could control such power so easily. He gave the lady the letter that she had been sending him all this time. It was written there that giving birth to his child would be an extremely dangerous thing for her, so he must fulfill any of her requests. This was true because the piece of paper was exactly Evelina's handwriting. Judging by the neatness of her handwriting and writing style, she was definitely of sound mind. The girl asked what the deal was. But the demon also had the imprint of the deal they had made. Neither holy power nor magical power felt as heavy energy as this. In the girl's hands was a real artifact, that is, an object from another world. Later, Iris would also acquire several similar artifacts. The saint said that she could not understand what was written there, to which the demon agreed to translate for her. In addition to the signature, all other letters are automatically converted into the language of the world. A tablet was created, and it was also written that Saint Evelina swears. She promises to become Aslan's female and give birth to an heir. The blonde decided to double-check Aslan's loyalty by asking if he was lying, taking advantage of her inability to read. When the lady asked this, he realized that she really did not remember anything of what they talked about. She asked if there were other conditions, but according to the deal, after she became his female, the man could not lie to her. Then, the blue-eyed girl double-checked what she asked for in return, this contract. But the girl only wanted 3 things from him, and he could do more. Among which, the first, he did not have time to announce, because the saint was informed that Captain Rathbun said that he had arrived on the business he had promised her. Hearing someone else's voice, the girl pushed the beast away from her and shouted for the guys to wait a little because she was busy. But her male clearly didn't like this attitude towards himself, which made him even angry. The girl immediately realized that she needed to get rid of him first. She tried to smile sweetly and asked the man to get out of bed, but she was refused. There was no time to waste, so the lady shouted for the demon to get back from here. But he looked at her displeasedly and clearly answered that he did not want and was not going to do this. He didn't understand why he had to do this, because now he was next to his female. The saint was frightened and asked the man to calm down, trying to push him away from her again. If he were an ordinary person, the girl would pretend that she had returned to her old habits. However, she couldn't be allowed to be caught with this man. Taking cunning into her fist, the girl hugged Aslan tightly, trying to explain that she was a saint. She does not want to appear inappropriately in front of people in the Great Temple. The blonde even called him her male so that he would understand her situation and let her go. Having bitten her on the neck, he agreed, and then said that he would return soon. Finally, Knight Rathbun burst into the room, but apparently did not see anyone near the saint. The girl awkwardly lied that she went to bed late. Therefore, it took a little longer than usual to wake up. Evelina understood that this was not a plausible excuse, and it could be the end for her. The Crown Prince apologized for the bad manners that arose while the lady was resting, but Leon heard that the girl had some kind of promise with Captain Rathbun, asking if that was true. Therefore, he thought that it would be better, at least, if the prince left. The man must have been disappointed in the blue-eyed girl. He could have simply left. But he began to speak useless words. But in return, the blonde asked him to promise that next time, when it was convenient for her, they could talk again. Surprised that this man still treated Evelina well, she smiled. The heir said that he would, in any case, wait for news from the saint, and then left the temple. Rathbun suddenly asked if everything was okay with the girl's body. After making sure that everything was normal, the man decided to start the first lesson. He said that when the blonde is ready, let her go into the living room and there they will begin. It's true the captain never asks anything, which made the saint happy. Self-defense lessons, the blonde requested, in order to get closer to Rathbun. Therefore, it was necessary to try to win his sympathy, and then perhaps they will become close, so that Rathbun will say that this cannot be so that he will not be able to immediately recognize her as a brilliant swordsman. The man said that he had prepared a wooden sword for training, after which all the girl's dreams were shattered into fragments. He explained this by saying that it was not wise to start training with a real sword. The lady felt ashamed that she had imagined all sorts of things, and she asked to start the lesson quickly. Then, the knight took out his real sword and offered to try to take it once. But alas, the saint could not hold him, because the real sword is too heavy. The man immediately apologized, because he had no idea that it would be so difficult for the girl. The blonde only admired this, because he really was incredibly heavy, although only with such weight can one resist monsters. Of course, you can lighten the weight if you make a sword from another ore or monster bone, but in this case, the power is lost. But it becomes possible to attack faster, but of course the most important thing is to find a suitable sword for yourself. This was the first time the saint had watched Rathbun speak for so long, and for some reason she herself became agitated. Blue Eyes realized that not all swords are the same, and everyone chooses and adapts to the sword that suits them, so everyone is unique. Because of this, knights value their sword as much as their lives. Instantly the lady began to apologize for almost dropping such a valuable sword. It was a huge relief that the man captured him safely. Suddenly, the commander realized that he had just given his sword to someone else. It seemed that she was disappointed in the wooden sword, and without realizing it, Rathbun gave her his valuable sword. The commander asked to squeeze the hand tighter and not to straighten the elbow too much, and it is imperative to direct the force even to the little finger. It's impossible, such a basic technique, but it was very difficult for the girl. The brown-haired man asked if he could personally put the lady in the right position. Asking him to forgive, the man's hands fell on the saint's waist, causing her body to bend as needed. It was necessary to concentrate on the lesson, so the blonde listened carefully and did what she was told. Suddenly, the girl noticed a wound on the knight's hand, realizing that he had not received proper treatment, to which he said that it was an ordinary scratch, and it was not worth wasting the holy power of the priests on it. Finally, the lady was already worthy of her first praise. She stated that all this was thanks to the commander of the Knights of the Great Temple, Rathbun. As a thank you for her teaching, the girl asked to lend her teacher a hand, beginning to heal him with divine power. It was more reliable when there was a good teacher. She wanted to work hard and grow in skills. But the man explained that even if the saint mastered the sword, it would take a lot of time to be able to inflict a significant blow on the enemy. However, she wields the monster dagger Kailas. The only dagger on the continent made from the bone of the monster Kailas is a precious sword that retained the monster's special ability to return to the enemy the damage inflicted by the owner of the dagger. This weapon was passed on to the saint from generation to generation. There is no need to study and master a sword with difficulty. If for the sake of self-defense, then a dagger would be much better suited. Rathbun believed that if you learn the right way to address, you can soon use it. But now, unlike other jewelry kept in the central temple, this dagger was kept by the saint herself. However, Evelina gave it to someone in case something happened. She literally gave away the weapon as a gift for spending the night with her. The lady could not understand how she could give away the temple treasure like that. She decided not to say anything at all about this. The back streets of the city surrounding the temple, its dark side, where drugs and stolen goods are sold. The blonde had no choice but to check if her dagger was there. She again had to go outside through the secret passage. But first, it would be worth getting ready to go out in order to do everything quietly. It was necessary to come up with a good plan because such things require careful preparation. It was necessary to make sure that there would be no problems after the saint left the room, and all the paperwork had to be taken care of. She was informed that the list of candidates for the position of high priest had already arrived today. Either Karis didn't arrive or it was too late. The saint asked to find out where Priest Karis was and to prepare everything for the pre-election meeting. Blue Eyes suddenly thought that Prince Leon might show up in her absence. She also asked to prepare a letter for Prince Leon, but she was told that the prince was not here. The priest heard that he left in a hurry and most likely returned to the Empire. But he could change his mind, and this should no longer worry the saint. He said it as if he was going to wait forever. Tomorrow the girl plans to pray alone in her room, telling the priests about it. After the lady had dealt with all the matters, she was ready to go. Breaking off a secret passage with the help of magic, Evelina found herself on that very street. There were a lot of people, and fortunately, no one paid attention to the saint. If she passes through the door, she will find herself outside the temple. Suddenly, Evelina wondered if she needed to return at all. After all, if the girl leaves forever, she will no longer worry about being burned at the stake. Instantly, someone from the crowd shouted and ordered the lady to stop. The knights of the temple walked along the street, and also among them, Rathbun. The saint quickly began to come up with an excuse for herself so as not to ruin her relationship with the man. But as it turned out, the knight was not chasing a saint at all, but some guy who had forbidden things in his hands. As it turned out, this man was carrying with him a stolen Bible from the temple. Rathbun was very angry that someone would dare steal such a sacred thing from the temple. It seems that the captain noticed the silhouette of the saint, but tried not to pay attention to it. He calmed himself with the thought that the blonde definitely couldn't be here. This must be a place where people go often, but no one knows about it. For some guy, everything was even very excellent, which made passers-by even jealous. This lasts a very long time. His flattery is so obvious that she will soon get tired of it. Suddenly, the girl remembered that passerby, because they were talking about how he had a wallet full of money. although in the end they simply threw it away, leaving him with some kind of cheap dagger. When his friend started thinking about it again, he felt very funny at the thought. The blonde followed the man, wondering what she should do or say, even though he might recognize her. Following him, the lady suddenly found herself on that same legendary street. The boy tried to sell the dagger, but everyone drove him away because they thought it was cheap. Suddenly, seeing one huckster have his weapon, the girl was delighted. The man asked what such a young lady was doing here and why she had come here. She calmly explained that she had come for that dagger and also asked to announce its cost. The merchant was ready to give such a beautiful lady half a gold coin. But suddenly, the saint heard someone's voice who told her from behind that this was an obvious scam for money. Turning around, the lady saw Crown Prince Leon himself, who apparently recognized the saint. If they had bargained more, they would have bought that dagger for 3 coins. The girl thanked the prince, because thanks to him, she bought what she wanted much cheaper. Suddenly, the friendly conversation turned into an interrogation, and Leon asked what the blonde was doing here. He was more worried about the fact that this was a very dangerous place, and what the commander of the knights thought when he sent the saint alone. The blue-eyed girl understood that if Rathbun found out about this, then there would be no problems, so she said that in any case, thank you to the man for his help today. Wanting to get away from the conversation as quickly as possible, the lady runs away, when suddenly a horse and rider begins to fly towards her. The blonde did not stand aside and covered the girl with his body. Noticing a drop of blood on the blue-eyed woman's cheek, the man apologized for not being able to protect her from everything. He said that next time he would not make such a mistake. The blonde asked not to let the dirt touch the girl, because he would definitely protect her. Suddenly, realizing that this man must really like the saint, she put her hand on his neck. The girl immediately noticed that the prince's robe was all dirty and wrinkled. It was because of her, so the saint hastened to apologize. Having picked up new clothes, the man asked if it suited him, but there were clothing stores on that side, although the prince really knew the street well. Leon smiled and asked to just call him by his name. The blonde was afraid that this was not entirely polite, but the risk was that the prince could be discovered in such a place. When a saint appears, that is, the custom is that those who have the same names as the saint change them. Therefore, the lady asked to call her Lena. The lady really wanted the man to address himself not to Saint Evelina, but to a real girl. The blonde asked if by chance the girl wanted to see the city. He thought that he could become an excellent guide. The crown prince said that the roof, created in a special way, is used to take water from the rain. Houses that do not have running water are mainly built this way. There were hotels to the side to make them stand out. They were decorated in the same way. This is a feature of the city where there are a lot of tourists. The blonde asked if the saint was hungry, because this city had some pretty good snacks that were worth trying. All the appetizers actually looked quite appetizing. The man took too much food, and the saint doubted whether she could eat it all. After a while, Evelina had already eaten enough, but she still had some kebab left. The lady was sorry to leave the food, when suddenly the crown prince began to eat directly from the girl's hands. Walking around the city, the blonde began to admire the beautiful paintings. She saw many landscapes for the first time, surprised that these places really existed. Leon began to tell that there is a place, the plateau of the King of Wolves, of course. Real wolves do not live there, but when the wind blows, it seems that wolves are howling, hence the name. There was also Hefferman Forest, an amazing place where no matter where you enter, you leave from the same place. The blonde remembered one place, the location of which she saw on the internet in her previous body. Then, addressing the saint as Lena, the man suggested that they go there together someday. He said that the picture is a snow-covered land located in the far north. It is very cold there. As long as Lena remains a saint of the Great Temple, then these are all just dreams, but in reality, they are impossible. Blue-Eyed suddenly asked if Lena would return to this place again. The lady thought what would happen if she honestly told Leon, because he could help her escape. However, there was one place I needed to go back and finish. The prince thought that she probably had a secret route. She would want to keep it a secret, so the man would go a little later. A few days ago, monsters appeared in a village on the other side of the continent. Fortunately, the knights who were nearby quickly ran in and destroyed them. But many people were poisoned by the deadly poison of the monsters. Their bodies were burning from the inside. People asked for help, or at least to save their children. Even a few high-ranking priests will not be able to neutralize this hell. However, the saint directed all her strength to help, using her divine power. Everyone was simply happy that Saint Evelina finally showed up to save them. It is said that people were delighted when the holy girl appeared, but the woman became confused and ran away. Leon stated that there could not be two saints at the same time. This is proof that the saint in the Great Temple is fake. Everyone assumed that all this time they were not trying to cast a shadow on the saint of the great temple, and now is the opportune moment, because they must take possession of that real saint. It was imperative to find that woman and find out if anyone was behind her. The saint looked especially bright today. It looks like she received God's favor through yesterday's prayer. The blonde thought that since she found the dagger, she was able to sleep well and should try again from today. Finally, Captain Rathbun came to see the girl. The man apologized that it was sudden, but he came to get permission to leave. The lady, without even hearing the reason, already gave permission. Having learned that the absence would be on some business, the girl was ready to listen. The fact is that, according to the reports of the knights who accompanied the priest Charles, his health suddenly deteriorated on the way to the temple. They said it would be difficult for him to get up right now. The brown-haired man asked to go with the priests to meet him to provide treatment, to which the blonde asked to bring him safe and sound. For the first time, Rathbun was able to obtain permission to leave the great temple so easily. Passing by the servants, the man saw a robe familiar to him, which it seems that the saint wore to the city. These were things to be washed, so the servants did not understand what was going on. The knight wondered why, without saying a word to the knights, she left the great temple alone. Deciding that he would ask the lady personally, the man noticed Leon, who was here again for some reason. He suddenly went into the saint's room, calling her Lena, but in turn, the girl said that he was on time. Instantly, the knights asked the commander if he was okay, because he looked tired. The crown prince was absent then. He was outside the temple with the saint. The man said that they did a great job, accompanied by Priest Karl. 3 high-ranking priests are treating him, and soon he will be able to move. Suddenly, the brown-haired man was told that at that moment, when the priest Karl lost consciousness, something strange happened. The priest's state was as if he had been enveloped in the magic of a monster. When Rathbun walked towards Karl, he just smiled and greeted him. The 2 men had not seen each other for a very long time. He asked how the knight was doing, to which he replied that of course that was good. Priest Karl, who was always kind and attentive to everyone respected him and followed him. All except one single person. But the priest's well-being was more important, because the man heard that it was impossible to know the reason why he lost consciousness. But the man didn't know anything, because his body was not very healthy to begin with, but this was the first time something like this had happened to him. But now everything is fine, thanks to the efforts of Commander Rathbun and the priests. Karl said that if the saint had come herself, he would not have caused inconvenience to so many people. No one can ask the saint for healing. In addition, he cannot but know that the saint hates him, but despite this, the priest asked if everything was all right with Saint Evelina. She had always been fine, but Karl must have been tired after the treatment, so the man decided to go and let him rest. But the fair-haired one said that he could stay a little longer, but the brown-haired one refused, saying that they would talk longer when they arrived at the great temple. The commander left the temple saying that he would return first. All the fish in the Morton River change the color of their scales to gold once a year. On such days, no one fishes, everyone prays. Prince Leon had already been there. It was dazzlingly beautiful. The girl asked what about that place and pointed it out on the map. But if you go there and are careless, you can get hurt. It was an empire, or rather the imperial palace was also a pretty funny place. Since this place has existed for several hundred years, it has always been completed, so you can see the characteristics of each generation there. And also the living architecture of the continent in chronological order, one might say. And the central market of the empire has all the things of the continent. It is so big and confusing that it is impossible to get around everything in a day. The blonde said that it would be a disaster if a person like her who doesn't know his way around goes there. But Crown Prince Mr. Leon said that there is no reason to worry because Lena is his personal guide. However, if Iris appears, she will end up being the one Leon loves. By the way, the man said that if another high-ranking priest comes, a meeting to select a high priest will open. He abruptly changed the subject as the girl understood, saying that Commander Rathbun had gone after this man. Before the girl had time to finish speaking, severe pain pierced her body. She immediately apologized for the fact that she suddenly felt ill. The lady looked away and politely enough asked him to leave so she could deal with it alone. When Leon's hand touched the saint, her body became hot and her temperature rose. Despite such severe pain, this feeling was suddenly replaced by a very pleasant sensation. The blonde realized that she needed to return to the room before anyone came. Now, under no circumstances could she meet anyone. The girl tried to come to her senses, but suddenly a sound was heard from the room because they had an urgent matter for which they needed to enter. The man said that he met with the priest Karl and just returned. But he needs to talk about something, so Rathbun is obliged to enter for a short time. But the lady suddenly shouted that you couldn't go in to see her. The brown-haired man thought that the saint might be ill. But for a girl, starting from the bottom, her body gradually begins to burn. Something was begging Rathbun to come in, but Lena herself did not want this more than anything else. The knight entered the room and the girl smelled his body odor. He said that he would like to ask him to check something. The saint asked to do this next time, saying that it would not last long and she needed to leave before it was too late. Realizing that the blue-eyed girl couldn't stand it any longer, she looked away. The lady instantly approached her knight and kissed him deeply. She was completely confident that today Rathbun would be able to satisfy her. The blonde began to lick someone else's lips, begging him to open the brown-haired man's mouth for a kiss. He wanted to explain to the girl that this shouldn't be done, when suddenly they threw him into bed and said that the saint wanted his body. Evelina wanted to hug Rathbun, kiss him and take advantage of him. The lady did not understand why the man was stopping him. What should she do to get him to hug her? The saint desperately wanted to know what needed to be done to seduce this honest knight, and sitting on top of him, the lady asked if he really hated her. It seems that this is all the work of the real Evelina. Having come to her senses, the blonde was surprised at what she was doing, and then hurried to run away. Burying herself in bed, the lady screamed that Rathbun shouldn't be in the man's place. She didn't understand what to do and how to cope with this situation. Suddenly, a red-haired man appeared from the window, calling the lady his female. Aslan understood that the girl was apparently waiting for him. Everything was fine, because if the man was here, then she would definitely be able to quench this thirst. But suddenly the male declared that the smell of another male was coming from his female. Aslan sharply grabbed the lady by the throat and brought her face closer to him. The demon asked if the other male had touched her somewhere else. The beast began to bite parts of the saint's body in order to find a place where other people could touch. But surprisingly, the lady only asked to do this again. After the blonde lost consciousness once again, the man concluded that she was very weak. He wanted to give her the ring while she was awake, but due to the fact that they did terrible things over and over again, there was no time or memory for this. He wondered if the holy gem would like it. If the lady saw it, she would definitely smile brightly. It was necessary to deal with the mark on Evelina's thigh as soon as possible. Having touched this scar, the man realized that it was directly related to strong thirst. The realization came to him that his female did not want to give herself to him of her own free will. Aslan will definitely find the person who used this vile magic and kill him, tearing him to shreds. It was because of this that the other male's scent came from. These trifling human males are not important anyway. After all, in the end his seed is much stronger. However, the redhead wanted to have sole possession of this human woman. The demon realized that priests did not go along this path because it was a secret passage. This is an unusual person. He is so strong that he can resist monsters. The commander of the Temple Knights, he was this strong knight. The redhead whispered that it was he who left the scent of another man. Rathbun went through all the strange situations with the saint, reluctant to forget her. It seems that the man felt the same as Evelina, and no matter how much he said the prayer, he did not weaken. The brown-haired man tried to tell himself that under no circumstances should he have such feelings for the saint. Having decided that the knight should meet his love, he got out of bed and headed to her room. The mission of the Knight Commander and the glory he had gained, everything Rathbun had pursued until now felt vague. One thing was clear, she, Evelina, and the commander of the knights wanted to brazenly call her by name. The next morning, the brown-haired man said that he wanted to see the saint. But they explained to him that the meeting would now be difficult, because the saint had completely closed the doors. Perhaps the girl wanted to spend time alone, as before, or rather, with one of her fans. The knight thought that it was better to return, and that he could not go to her in secret. He began to fight the desire to see the blonde, when suddenly he sensed someone's mana. This power seemed to come from Saint Evelina's room. Rathbun tried to enter, but magic blocked his powers and entrance. He rushed to the beast and asked how he got into the great temple, to which he grinned because it was not bad for a temple dog. The man immediately understood that the one standing in front of him was a knight who dared to desire the lips of his mistress. The demon picked the girl up and declared that he could just take her for himself. Aslan said his name, and at least he should know the name of the one who will kill him. Such a great battle was prevented by the tears of the lady, through sleep. Finally, the priests began to congratulate their neighbor, Priest Carl. Green Eyes is also very happy to return to the great temple. In her dream, the lady saw that place again. The blonde did not understand why she was here again, because Evelina was not there. Lena was fully aware that she had lost her mind because of that very mark on her thigh. The lady remembered the demon's words that, according to her condition, they would get rid of this mark. But this was not created in one day. This would have been impossible without her consent. The blonde urgently needed to understand what exactly happened, or rather, to return forgotten memories. If only the girl could know about them even for a moment. Finally, memories appeared that Carl told her as a little girl that having understood one thing, she understood everything else. The girl finally realized that these were Evelina's distant memories. The little saint did everything right. She was very insightful, as you would expect from someone who receives the most love from God. For the first time, Blue-Eyed saw these memories that the real Evelina hid. In the memories they love her, it was interesting why she was hiding them, but other memories were needed. She also remembered her first prayer meeting. Carl always supported the girl, saying that she doesn't have to send blessings to everyone. If it's hard, then she can stop when she wants. As the priest said, Evelina is the one who receives the love of God. Blue Eyes said that she should share her powers with those people who need her help, so she will not disappoint those people who need her help. Lena tried to show herself the memories that her body was hiding from everyone. As it turned out, Carl was to blame for that mark because the girl cried, saying that she was giving away her divine power by following his teachings. Suddenly, the real Evelina appeared in this space and began to ask the girl how she got here and why. Her holy power was diminishing again, and the lady was preventing the blonde from fully viewing her memory. It seems that something must change if the new Lena finds out about what happened, because only then will there be a reason why she is hiding everything. Blue Eyes asked if Evelina called Aslan because she wanted to get rid of the mark. The girl said that she would do as she wanted and get rid of the mark. Evelina just laughed and asked how much longer this girl would be impudent. She said that it was not worth bringing Lena, and she had to endure it until the last. Therefore, the blonde threw the lady into another reality, ordering her to return. There is still a card left to play. Finally, the saint came to her senses, which was highly anticipated by the two men standing nearby. The blonde wanted to lose consciousness again, but Rathbun only asked for an order and he would cut this guy's throat. But the demon replied that the temple dog lacks training because he brazenly drools and dares to lust after his master. The beast said that it was better to tell the truth. The fact that the girl hugged him was not at her request, but a mistake due to magic. Suddenly, in order to get rid of personal questions, he lowered the lady's hem and showed the hickeys that he left, thereby angering the man. The beast showed a mark on the girl's thigh, saying that this mark would soon eat his mistress. And of course, soon she will lose her divine power. And also, it will control her body at will. This was the reason for the incident that happened between them. Aslan explained to Rathbun that his mistress called him in order to get rid of this curse. Red wasn't going to say the terms of their contract, so the lady had nothing to worry about. The knight asked the saint if the words of this demon were true. But no matter how you look at it, this problem is difficult to solve inside the great temple, so the girl asked Aslan for help. The man seemed disappointed that their kiss was a mistake. Evelina was weak-willed yesterday. She couldn't say for sure whether it was because of magic. However, she wanted to say something, but Aslan did not let him, starting to be jealous. The knight commander failed to notice how something was wrong with her mistress, so he is incompetent. But is there any need to raise a puppy who could not recognize how the enemy entered? The brown-haired man asked the saint for forgiveness because he was too inept. Everything was clear that the redhead was not a person at all. He exudes manner that can harm a person. Even if he is necessary, you need to maintain the maximum distance from him. Instantly, Crown Prince Leon knocked on the room, and the girl, in turn, allowed him to enter. The blonde entered the room, saying that he had brought a book with illustrations. The saint suddenly shouted that if those two fought, she would use the help of Crown Prince Leon. Today, a new high priest will finally be elected. Yesterday, a huge disaster almost happened, but the lady trusted the prince. For some time, the demon will be nearby the temple, so you can call him at any time if necessary. The blue-eyed girl understood that Rathbun did not have an offended expression on his face. But really, all three of them liked her, even though she was the main character, Iris. If anyone finds out that she is a fake saint, all three of them will lose interest in her. For the crown prince, since the girl is fake, she will become useless. Aslan will not need a body that cannot bear his child, and Rathbun can only be faithful to a true saint. Therefore, they will do without empty hopes, and the girl must cope alone. Finally, the time has come when Evelina will be able to meet Carl. But at the meeting, the lady saw only familiar faces. Apparently, the man had not arrived yet. Instantly, one of the priests said that he had something to tell. More precisely, he would like to voluntarily withdraw his candidacy. As it turned out, many priests abandoned their candidacy. The saint asked what happened and why everyone suddenly wanted to do this. Of course, it is very honorable to be a candidate for high priest, but Priest Carl returned, and when we met him, we immediately realized that he was the only one worthy to be high priest. When the long-awaited Karl arrived, a trembling ran through the girl's body, and she herself wanted to run away. But if she suddenly leaves, everyone will think it's strange. Suddenly, Rathbun approached the lady and asked if she was okay. Prince Leon told Lena that he would be the first one she would turn to for help. He knew that not only the captain of the knights and Prince Leon, but also that Demon was watching the girl. So you don't have to worry because there are many people close to the saint. The lady tried to realize that she was not alone now. This fear and trembling, Evelina's emotions, not hers. And the girl no longer needed to worry, so she confidently turned to the priest. She whispered that they had not seen each other for a very long time. An hour ago, the commander of the Rathbun Temple Knights and Crown Prince Leon met. The blonde smiled and said that the meeting to choose the high priest would soon begin, and he saw that the brown-haired man was heading to the saint. Even if they combined forces, how disappointed the saint was when she learned that he did not want this. The future emperor asked to tell him about the priest Karl, what he did before he came to the Great Temple. But Rathbun said that this question was inappropriate, because the priest Karl had been in the Great Temple since his birth. The man met with him because they say that he is a strong candidate for the position of high priest. It was an honor for the priest to host such a great man. He carefully thought out the tone, manner of speech, as well as the proper attitude towards strangers. Leon realized that this man was not like the one who had lived all his life in the Great Temple. But the candidate was wondering why the Crown Prince remained in the Great Temple. After all, perhaps he has some personal business here. The blonde was surprised that Karl did not know about this, but with pride in his eyes, he said that he was here to get the saint into his hands. The priest announced that it was time to start a meeting regarding the election of the high priest and asked the named candidates to stand one by one. The blonde thought that there was no need to worry. Not everyone withdrew their candidacy. 3 people stood up for the last count, and Priest Karl stood up. An eerie atmosphere appeared. It seemed as if Charles had already been confirmed for the position of high priest. The main candidate himself thought that he would soon be able to return everything back. The saint planned to use him to oppress Evelina, but now she is not sure if this is the right decision. Rathbun asked if her ladyship would like the priest Charles to take the position of high priest. Because if that's the case, then she can order him to stop it. After the applause stops, Charles will become a real high priest. Blue-Eyed didn't know how the knight knew this, but he wanted to say that he would stop Karl, even if he didn't know how exactly. But the brown-haired man will definitely be able to do something, because he is a man who keeps his word. Suddenly the lady asked the man not to let Charles become high priest. He only took out his sword and asked for forgiveness for his rudeness at such a meeting, but he would like to ask for permission to a more important issue. Kneeling on one knee before the saint, the knight asked for immediate dismissal, and this was due to the fact that he had not fulfilled his duties. Aslan really did not like this power, although it is not visible to the human eye. Like when he came into this world through a crack, and the longer he stayed here, the more strength he lost. The beast needed more power, and if there was one creature with similar power to it, and they could have a child, then it could return. It was necessary to come up with a way to give birth to him, because there is no woman in this world who can cope with his seed, because it represents a huge clot of power. The saints of one world are the ones who close the cracks into which a man needs to return. They are his enemies. And in such a situation, he could not believe that the girl herself turned to him. Red was ready to fulfill any wish if the saint gave birth to a child for him. The blonde sat and understood that this urgently needed to be stopped. Everyone said that it was absurd when the party itself asked for dismissal. Perhaps he was tired of this hectic life of a Templar, but could dismissal be something that was quickly decided? The priest said that they understand that the task of the knights is difficult, but all this can be solved if, without going to such extremes. But the man said that not long ago the undead invaded the temple, and unfortunately, he did not notice it and could not stop it. The saint suddenly realized that they were talking about Aslan. But the brown-haired man was sure that he was not worthy to bear the sacred duty. No one understood what kind of undead we were talking about, when suddenly the temple was pierced by powerful magic. A huge amount of magic comes from heaven, which Aslan emitted from himself. It was definitely a demon, and the girl was trying to understand what he was up to with such powerful magic. The entire council realized that this magic was emanating from the creature that Captain Rathbun was talking about. And everyone was right as before, and since he could not stop it, it would be right to fire the knight. But for this, they have to follow the established procedures. But in this case, it will take a lot of time. Then elect a high priest, because this is the most important issue now. The priest didn't understand. With such an amount of power, it should have been just a huge demonic beast. But how could something so big simply be overlooked? The magic became stronger, so all people were ordered to go to cover. Rathbun approached the saint and asked her to just leave him. But the girl didn't understand. The knight couldn't just take everything and throw it away. The man could not help but notice how the lady was worried about him, but she asked for help, but did not want him to sacrifice himself. The brown-haired man asked not to worry because he was not going to leave the saint alone. He tried to hug the lady, but suddenly an animal entered through the window, ordering him to remove his hands. He was indignant that the man should stop twirling his tail and just leave. Evelina in turn noticed that the demon looked tired. Aslan hugged the blonde, to which she asked Rathbun to go out for a while, because she would come soon. She explained this by saying that she needed to talk to the monster about what happened. To this, the brown-haired man bowed and said that he would be at the door. The demon was surprised that this dog listened to the saint, although she had good taming skills, but the saint asked him to stop treating people like dogs. The lady asked what he had done, because there was a lot of magical power. Now that she thought about it, the man had actually helped because the meeting had been cancelled. He knelt down and pressed his nose to the girl, although he was the one who now looked like a dog. The demon said that he had just spread a net because he needed to find out where the lady's holy power went. It seems that if this monster can find the place where the power went, then it can find Iris, or rather the real main character of this novel. She already wanted to get up from the chair, but the man asked to stroke him more because he felt nice and warm. Or this time he should please the blonde. But since the male and female were in the main hall, the saint threatened that if he continued, she would call Rathbun. But the beast was ready to take another look at this dog. Lena suggested that Aslan only liked her body. He did not deny that the girl's body was beautiful, because she was his female. But she never gave permission to do anything else. The blue-eyed girl suggested that monsters like demons want to get the soul. It seems that this soul was located somewhere in the chest, as well as the heart. The man admitted honestly that he wanted to win her ladyship's heart. Normally, a monster would never do anything for a human. That is why Aslan asked to smile at him. He explained that he would like to see the saint smile, but did not know a way, and it seemed that she was unhappy with the ring. The girl wondered where this object, which she had not seen before, came from, but it turned out that Aslan gave it to her, saying that he would let the lady go for today, so it was worth smiling at him once, like other people. But the man remained dissatisfied with the false smile, saying that she could go, and if something came across, he would immediately come to tell her. Priest Karl, Leon has become confident that he is the most dangerous person for Lena. When he saw him, he realized that this man would become the high priest. But don't they say that excessive modesty is hypocrisy? In any case, the blue-eyed man wanted to tell Karl something, because he is extremely interested in the saint. This meant that she was beautiful, moreover, she was more innocent than the rumors about her, as a man simply could not help but fall in love. However, she is presented with a guard, Commander Rathbun, who greatly irritates him. And if Charles becomes high priest, he will be able to drive him to the outskirts of the city. But this was an inappropriate question, and of course he would not become a high priest, but no priest could fulfill such a request. But everything was according to plan, because first, the man had to refuse. Instantly, the priest asked whether he sincerely admired the saint. The crown prince who is in love and is not calm because of the saint, this was enough to take advantage of it. A knight and a magician, these two have powers that will definitely help the saint. However, affairs in the world are decided not only by force. The man does not know about the battle on the field, but here, the great temple, is a place where they fight not with force, but with their heads, and Leon will be the person who will ultimately get Lena's heart. The mana will spread across the entire continent and will weaken, and will soon reach a level where an ordinary priest will not be able to sense it. Rathbun said, that is why they are now looking for the monster, but the knights will not be able to do this. These three really joined forces and helped Evelina. It would be nice if all three could live and continue to get along with each other. The lady was informed that the priest Karl was asking for an informal meeting, and the blue-eyed lady had some free time from work in the afternoon. The man said that until the essence of the mana that covered the entire continent and the temple is revealed, no one can meet with the saint one-on-one. Due to the current situation, they will meet under the personal supervision of Commander Rathbun, as the girl said. And the meeting place will be the official reception of the temple. In a place where there are always a lot of people, he will not be able to openly harm the saint. Surprisingly, Priest Karl was late. Instead, Crown Prince Leon appeared, but the blonde said that she had an appointment with the Priest Karl. But he also came because the Priest Karl asked for a meeting. Suddenly, again a sharp pain dug like a needle into Evelina's chest. When the prince ran up to her and asked what was hurting her, the lady sharply asked to hug her, because she again had a strong desire to quench her thirst. Realizing what the blonde had just done, she pushed the man away from her. She fell to the floor and screamed for no one to come close to her. The body began to feel hot, and the girl understood that if someone came up now, there would be trouble, but she needed to withstand this pain. The prince grabbed the brown-haired man by the cloak. Had this really happened before with the knight? The blonde was angry that Rathbun knew everything and left it as it was, and calls himself the commander of the knights. Leon was already raising his fist to hit his opponent, but he was stopped by Lena. The lady told and showed that one mark was doing strange things to her. The crown prince asked if there was a way to mitigate this. Tears rolled down the saint's cheeks, and she admitted that earlier Aslan had hugged her. There was only one way, so the blonde touched the man and asked him to hug her. Someone has already started checking whether there are people in the room, although recently there were definitely signs of someone's presence there. Really, in a place where there are always a lot of people, he won't be able to openly harm her. The blonde knew that everything was a setup, as the priests had already burst into the room. Carl really lured the lady into a trap and set her up badly. Out of despair, grabbing her dagger, the girl swung her hand to stab herself, but the prince stopped her. She was sure that if she cut out the mark or cut off her leg, she would get rid of this pain. The man immediately hugged the lady, saying that he wanted her too, but not in that way. Blue Eyes lifted the saint into his arms, but Rathbun ordered him to stop, asking what he was going to do with her. That day, she also cried, although she was not out of her mind as she is now. Those tears could not be ignored. The prince only hugged his beloved and asked Rathbun to close his eyes and cover his ears, and also turn around. Blue-Eyed asked not to give a reason to repeat it twice, because the knight wouldn't be able to do it anyway. The dog doesn't even dare. The commander of the knights who stands in her defense has no right. The brown-haired man turned away, hearing the saint's pleas for her to finally be hugged. The man knew that the saint was not herself. At least he would make sure that this did not become a terrible memory. Right now, if the blonde really wanted him herself, that would be great. When Leon finished satisfying Evelina, she apologized and fainted. For the first time, he felt so pathetic and empty inside. Suddenly, the same priest Carl knocked on the living room, asking if she was inside. There was no answer, but the man did not feel very well, and therefore was late. But if he were in her place, he would definitely have waited. He really believed in the saint, but one of the priests said that he had recently heard sounds from inside, but thought that maybe the saint had some personal matters. He meant that she was inside, so Carl suggested going in and taking a look. The freak began to think with whom the saint relieved her thirst, with the crown prince or with the commander of the knights. But in any case, if others see the girl in this light, they will definitely turn away from her. Then Evelina had no choice but to cuddle up to him again, so the man asked to excuse him, but since they said that she was inside, he decided to come in without knocking. Suddenly, the voice of Leon was heard, who was indignant that the priest was late, although he himself would make an appointment. The priest did not understand what had happened and why he was alone. This is illogical because there is nowhere to hide in that room. The blonde began to ask why he was looking around like a rat, but Carl kept trying to understand where the saint had gone. The next morning, the blonde woke up in a hot bath. She immediately realized that she was at Rathbun's house. The girl was scared because she had recently been in the waiting room, and what the hell happened? The commander brought clean clothes and towels, when suddenly he had to go in because the saint almost lost consciousness. The brown-haired man apologized for his tactlessness. The blue-eyed girl did not remember what happened, had the man really pulled her out of the waiting room, although this was impossible. The green-eyed one said that everything had already been resolved, and there was no need to worry. This is the worst thing that could happen. The girl did not even dare to explain the situation. Tears welled up in her eyes from the realization that neither Rathbun nor Leon would want to be near her anymore. All the other priests must have also clearly seen the disdainful saint who indulges in debauchery regardless of time and place. Evelina was afraid that the end of this story could not be changed. The lady wondered if there was any point in going further, because now she really wanted to die. Suddenly, Lena realized exactly what Evelina had felt all her life. Since she has the body of a saint, she could not die the way she wanted, and neither could the girl. Turning away, the blonde ordered her to be released. The lady said that the commander should not force himself to do this. Having shouted that his duty as the commander of the Rathbun Knights is to protect, then there is no need to try to fulfill his duty for a saint like her. The man suddenly said that these actions were not just his responsibility. But the girl was completely sure that the knight hated her, because it was unpleasant for him to even touch her. He hated her so much that he rejected her to the last. Suddenly, to calm the younger one down, the man got down on his knee and apologized. He tried to explain the reason why he rejected the saint. The fact is that she did not sincerely want him at that moment because the brown-haired man wanted the girl to want it from her heart and not from her body, because his feelings are not his duty as a knight. He said with confidence that he had had this attitude towards her for quite a long time. The man admitted that he has feelings for the blonde that shouldn't exist. He wanted to touch her and kiss her. He wanted to possess her. But when the crown prince hugged the saint, the brown-haired man was jealous of him. Lena was suffering, and Rathbun did not have such thoughts at that moment. The blonde kissed the man on the forehead and said that these were her true feelings. The couple kissed on the lips, and the knight said that he was in love with the saint. And also, he loves her more than anyone in the world. The blonde was told how they were able to get out of there safely thanks to Aslan. When they literally came to a dead end, the girl said that there was a secret passage in the wall. But as it turned out, Rathbun knew about this from the beginning. When the man carried her asleep into the room, he also knew about the passage. The brown-haired man awkwardly looked away and asked for one request. Lena thought it was quite difficult, but Rathbun asked to call Evelina by name. But the lady smiled and asked to call her simply Lena. The saint wanted to hug him, but she felt Aslan's magic and simply thanked him for the night seeing her off. She asked the brown-haired man to leave, and he said that no matter who she was, he had no right to discuss. But if in any way the girl was hurt, then Rathbun asked permission to protect her. He was absolutely worried about her due to the sudden appearance of the signal. Lena likes Rathbun, but that doesn't mean she hates Leon or Aslan. Fortunately, the demon lingered and allowed the knight to leave. The beast may hate, but he sent Rathbun away very easily, because the girl cared about this guy even though he annoyed him. The blonde said that she was very lucky with Aslan, because she heard that he helped resolve the situation in the reception room. But this was the first time the redhead had heard such words. He had a strange premonition, and he went there. The girl was unconscious, and people with holy power were swarming outside the door. They were about to enter, and Aslan thought, the saint will not like this, that's all, although it was Karl's trap. Thanks to the guy, she got out of it. The blonde asked what he was doing there and why his clothes were so revealing. But the priest Karl himself called him, saying that he had something to tell, and they also invited the saint. Why then does he ask what the prince is doing here, and also brought so many priests to this place? The priest stated that originally this was a place where priests often visited. He also asked what happened to the crown prince's clothes and what he was doing here. Blue Eyes said that he thought about the saint while he was waiting for Karl, and he needed to deal with his excitement. The man assumed that he was deliberately making him angry. But as he said earlier, his feelings for the saint are sincere. The blonde hoped that Karl would no longer try to piss him off. The heir ordered to greet him with a smile next time. After learning what happened, the girl said that Aslan would continue to help her, even in those things that were not included in their agreement, so she wanted to know what she could do for him. But the demon only asked that if something happened, she asked him for help. And all he needs is gratitude from the saint. The blonde smiled and asked the beast to take care of her. The man also noticed that everyone decided to call the lady Lena. It seems that Lena didn't really like being called a female. The day had been tiring, so the redhead would be there to protect the girl. Although they got out of Karl's trap safely, there was no way he would stop just like that. The good news is that even Karl himself cannot control this. If it were possible, the girl would be worried about it now. Evelina was informed that Crown Prince Leon had personally given her the letter. He said he would not ask for an audience and immediately left. But the saint suddenly left the room and asked Leon not to leave. The blonde said that he was going to leave because he was worried that the lady was tired, and he was wondering if she had a good rest yesterday. The blonde suddenly asked if the man had time now. Finally, the saint gathered all three guys in one room. She asked to be allowed to explain why she had gathered everyone here, but Aslan to some extent knew about it. The girl said that she had lost most of her memories. Rathbun understood why she seemed like a completely different person at times. It was still early, and yet the girl did not have the courage to tell them that she was fake. The blonde said that she did not even remember how these marks appeared on her thigh, however, given the circumstances, she thought that the priest Karl was involved. The saint asked to help her because she wants to get rid of Karl. Leon was ready to kill him, but if Aslan had been right, he would not have left the priest alive either. Aslan said that these marks represent a complex hexagon, the origin of which is unknown. And if priest Karl dies, then there is a possibility that the problem will never be solved. At this point, the saint has found out that these traces are consuming her sexual desire. The temple has its own system. First, the girl was going to deprive him of the right to be the high priest. Fortunately, the case to stop Captain Rathbun was withdrawn. Everyone expected such a conclusion. He may have made some mistakes, but leaving is too much. Priest Carl said that they all knew his devotion and responsibility well. By the way, the girl is very glad that the meeting to elect a high priest has resumed again. Now Charles can take the post of high priest, but is he worthy of it? There is not much time left. The saint has driven the priest out of her sight in the past. But wherever he is, the man will always pray for the well-being of the saint. The man greeted Alec, since they had not seen each other for a long time. The guy looked healthy, so he asked how he had been all this time. Even being far away, he remembered the times he spent with the saint. The priest shook off Carl's hand, to which everyone called him a rude man. That boy was his old student. Since he is a newbie, he still doesn't know much. Carl was sure that soon everything would be in his hands. But a problem has arisen because the temple knights are searching the priest's place of residence. Rathbun asked for cooperation in the investigation and continued the case. It seems a suspicious item was found in Carl's room. The man himself was against Rathbun examining this thing. He really knew what it was, but the man did not dare to suspect him in this way. Because a search without prior notice, if they had warned him, he would have hidden it in advance. Finally, the saint herself appeared at the crime scene. The girl was sorry that the search was carried out in secret from him. However, these were forced measures. The lady asked Captain Rathbun to give the item to her. It was more serious than she expected, so Rathbun crushed the object with his sword. A black crow flew out of the box, starting to scream. The priest really brought the magical beast to the sacred temple. This was understandable, because the beast followed him, and the girl asked the knights to kill him. Since the man could not cope, the saint used her divine power. Everyone was shocked because the girl destroyed the red magic and saved everyone. There was a tree on the floor that blocked this power. By making a box out of this wood, Carl hid the presence of the magical beast. The blonde said that she received an anonymous letter. It said that he tamed demonic beasts on the outskirts of the empire, and that he brought them to the main temple. Naturally, the blue-eyed girl didn't believe it at first either. However, the contents of the letter, the lady could not think that it would be true. Carl shouted that this was a false accusation and someone planned it to harm him. The lady said that she too would like to believe that this was a false accusation because he was not a man capable of such a thing. The blue-eyed girl promised to try her best to prove his innocence. The saint climbed up to hug Aslan because he succeeded. To play out such a situation in front of everyone, if it became known that he was related to the demonic beast, his life would end. Her ladyship thanked the magician for his help. Very soon, Priest Carl will be finished. In fact, she is now being embraced by the king of demonic beasts. But sooner or later, she will still cease to be a saint. The blonde began to praise other people's magic, asking him to teach it to her. If she studies it, it will be useful when she leaves the main temple. The man explained that the holy power that the lady possessed would reject the magical power. Surely she doesn't know this as well as she does with him, although he gets intimate with her, but most demonic beasts would turn to ashes if they touched the girl. Holy and magical powers are opposites, so magic is something she can use. But it's worth remembering that there are demonic beasts capable of resisting the holy power, and he, his child, who will be born in it. In any case, her holy power will disappear when Iris appears. Then the girl will have no problem learning magic. The man asked to tell him if she needed magic, but the blonde would do everything on her own, although she was interested in magic, possessing holy power. The demon asked what the blue-eyed girl was hiding from him. Magic will help the lady later, when she loses her power and leaves the temple. The girl said that she would like to try to do something that is impossible with the help of holy power. For example, fly freely and move around. Having learned that the saint would like to fly in the sky, the man picked her up in his arms and jumped from the window. The blonde suddenly started crying and saying that she was jealous because he could see such beauty every day. The demon stated that Lena can also do this freely whenever she wants. He said that he would fulfill her every wish, so his skills are their skills. Leon was asked in a letter if he was doing well in the Great Temple, because the Empress missed him. The man did not understand what kind of nonsense his father wrote, because his mother certainly did not miss him. He remembered how, as a child, he asked about his mother's hatred, but she could not hate the crown prince. Because thanks to his birth, the emperor is obsessed with her. The father will obviously swear at his son for sitting idle in the temple. Walking onto the roof, the prince met the commander of the knights, Rathbun, and noticed that he was admiring the sky. He watched so carefully how Aslan flew with the saint. The man could have just taken her, but he didn't. Even Aslan, the magic king, is trying to win Lena's heart, and then the prince will have to try harder. Instantly, taking advantage of the man's inattention, Leon hit him in the nose. All this was at Lena's request.